and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and happy week 2, everybody. If you got some waiver wire questions, please check out the Tuesday edition of this podcast. If you missed the week 1 games, you can check out the Monday edition of this podcast. But today, you're listening to this on a Wednesday, which means we are going game by game breakdown. And by we, I mean myself and Mr. Dwain McFarland, PFF senior analyst, creator, almost said owner, creator of the utilization report, which you can find on pff.com. One of the best pieces of fantasy advice, goodness that you can find out there on the old internet. Dwain, we were talking about the blood, sweat, and tears you put into that baby over the past 24 hours, but it is live and you can now move on with your life, my friend.
Yeah, man. Week 1 is always, it's the most fun week, but there's also the most to cover. And I'm going to be honest, by the time I went in alphabetical order, by the time I got to the last 4 teams, and I was just here alone, my kids and wife were all gone. And I dropped an F-bomb. I was like, oh my God, I got to get this thing done. And don't get me wrong, I love doing it and I have a lot of passion around it. But when you crunch data for 24 hours straight and your brain is mush. You know what I did to celebrate? I went and took a freaking nap, Ian, because I was up until 1 or 2 last night. I set my alarm and I got up at 4:30 this morning to come back in here and work on it and finish it. And I still didn't finish it until almost 11. And I had to take my son to school in between. So once I submitted that thing, I waited to make sure there was no immediate emergencies from the editor, hey, idiot, you screwed all these things up. And once that was good, I was like, all right, I took an hour and a half nap and I felt way better. I'm definitely sleep deprived at the moment.
From Sunday to Wednesday in season, man, it's I go to bed. I'm usually done working around midnight. I do some stuff during the day too. I'll try to get a workout in, hang out with the fam a little bit, but usually it's done working at midnight, wake up around 7 to get going again. But the second my last thing is turned in on Thursday, bro, it could be 1 p.m. It could be 2 p.m. We're getting loose in the Hartitz household at that point, man. The whiskey's flowing. I don't care, man. We don't have a normal 7-day, 9 to 5 schedule, whatever the hell the normal people do. So I'm not going to worry about it. But whatever, Dwain, that's enough complaining between us.
No complaining, man. I love it. I love it. But it is me adjusting to this work schedule, and it's different than what I had before. Honestly, it's easier because I just love everything that I'm doing. But yeah, I'm getting used to oh my God, I'm not getting any sleep for 2 days.
Either way, when you get to wake up and work on football, it's always a great day to be great. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. All 16 matchups, week 2. I'm going to take the away team. Dwayne's going to take the home team. We'll overlap a little bit, but the goal here, look, we can preview every single player in every matchup and talk for 3 hours. We're going to try to cut that in half, focus on just the most fantasy relevant takeaway from each team. So without further ado, let's get after it, people. First up, Thursday Night Football. We got the New York Football Giants at the Washington Football Team. Washington favored by 3.5 points, down from 4.5. Week low 41.5 point game total. So not expecting a lot of points in this one. Got to talk a little bit of Saquon Barkley here. A lot of us were disappointed at the usage and just the production last week. That was literally Saquon's worst game ever, just 27 total yards. When he got hurt against the Bears last year, he still found a way to get 28 yards before exiting the game. Now, the Giants, weren't really in that game in the fourth quarter. So his 47% snap rate, I think we see that get closer to 60 and more of a neutral situation. But it's clearly a situation where Devontae Booker is going to be a little more involved than we were hoping for. And having this game be just 3 days after, only 3 days of rest, I should say, since Saquon's game on Sunday, I'm not expecting a huge boost in production. I think in week 3, that's when we can maybe, start looking at, hey, 70, 80%, get Saquon back to his usual role. For now, though, we need to downgrade him a bit. So, hey, it's not like we went into last week with Saquon as our overall RB5, RB6. We had him as RB16. There were a good group of guys to take ahead of him. I will be moving him down just a little bit more. I think he needs to be a little closer to the RB2 borderline than the RB1 borderline. So, Dwayne, stop me if, any of these guys you think you would be not taking ahead of Saquon. David Montgomery, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Damian Harris. I think I'd start all of them over Saquon.
Oh man. Yeah. With it being a Thursday night game, I get it. Honestly, yeah. So I'm going to do my rankings tonight. Now that I've gotten the utilization. So I haven't dug deep into saying this was who I would start or sit, but I think that's the right range.
They're not egregious calls. That's all.
Right. It's the right range of guys I think you're talking about. And I'm with you. I think, and if you drafted Saquon, hopefully you did it eyes wide open and you knew that really what your goal was is just kind of make it through the first few weeks and then have a potential top in, RB1 the rest of the way. And I think that's still going to be intact. And honestly, that's what we should prefer, right? Because Saquon's really about the long game this season. We don't want him to be doing this in week 8, but as long as it's only like the next, say by week 4, we start to see, 80% of the old Saquon. And then by week 6, we get 100% or 90%, like we'll all be fine.
It would make sense, again, having the long recovery after the Thursday night game in week 2. Going into week 3, I'm really hoping we see the snap counts and the touches get back to normal. We're not, completely putting him on the back burner, though, people. I would still start Saquon ahead of Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, James Robinson, Devin Singletary, probably. Like guys that also have touch concerns. Okay, I'm taking Saquon over them, but it's a volume game. So when we have guys like Damian Harris, who is probably going to get 20 rush attempts more weeks than not, I just got to take that guaranteed volume. And someone like Miles Sanders, who is the more, just cemented lead back right now in a better, matchup. Just, it's not a great matchup for him either, but either way, 41.5 point game total. Like I said, this just is not the environment, unfortunately, to expect Saquon to pop off. So like Dwain said, we'll have our ranks up on PFF.com by Wednesday morning. I'm anticipating those Saquon probably being in that RB20 to RB23, 24 range. So not a must start this week. Still Saquon Barkley. He's always one carry away from making it, worth your while in there. But just, for another week at least, we need to be conservative with our Saquon RB1 season talk. Now, Dwain, Washington football team, we got Taylor Heineke under center. Sorry to anyone out there that was, relying on Ryan Fitzpatrick as a streamer option. Antonio Gibson, though, getting fed, and hopefully Terry McLaurin can make do with the targets. Who are you most interested here in this spot?
Yeah, this whole team it's a blow, man. Losing, Fitzpatrick. I know he's a journeyman, whatever, but we're talking about fantasy football, and Fitzpatrick is good for fantasy football. Taylor Heineke's not good for fantasy football. This is a down. I mean, this makes, in my mind, Terry McLaurin a wide receiver 3. He was a top end wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside every single week that you started in when you had Fitzpatrick. And remember, that's what we talked about. We were super excited about this element of really McLaurin's game that we hadn't really seen uncorked, and that we were going to get that with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And now that's gone again. And this team also has a really good defense. So I just see a game against the Giants where, again, Thursday night, not a lot of time to prep. I think they're just going to try to win this game however they can. I don't really want to use any of the Washington receivers if I can avoid it. I know you drafted McLaurin in the 3rd round. If you're starting 3 receivers in the league, he's probably got to be in your lineup. But it's not the time to be cute with Diami Brown, Adam Humphries, any of these other guys, which you're probably not anyway. Antonio Gibson, obviously you're going to start him. Got 0% of the long down and distance work, 0% of the 2-minute offense, but didn't really matter because he got 80% of the rushing attempts, which we also talked about that as well, that as long as Peyton Barber was out of the way, even if McKissick stayed in his passing down role, Gibson can essentially then be more like a Jonathan Taylor. Actually, he got more of the rushing attempts for his team than anybody besides Derrick Henry this last week. Henry was at 85% and Antonio Gibson was at 80%. So he's in a good spot. And even with that, 50% routes, man. So they're getting him out there on 1st and 2nd down, even though J.D. McKissick's getting in the game on 3rd down and long and those other situations. And man, a 33% targets per route run, like that is super healthy. So they're designed. What that tells you is they're designing things for him, Ian. So even if he's only out there on 1st and 2nd down, whenever they're designing things, just like they're doing for Jonathan Taylor, that's a good thing.
Yeah, we'll get to Jonathan Taylor in a bit, but his usage, even though we have Nyheim Hines working there, and even though J.D. McKissick is still getting those long down distance snaps, like having a 25 potential touch or floor, 20 touch floor, like we'll work with that. Even if we don't get the Christian McCaffrey rule we're all begging for, he'll still be an RB1 with this.
And we've seen it with Derrick Henry, right? I mean, Derrick Henry, because his percentage of the team's rushing attempts was always so high, it was enough to offset that he didn't get any of the passing down work. Now, a bad game script can kick you in the you-know-what, and it did this last week for Henry. It really got him because he hadn't had to thread that needle very often where the Titans were just getting blown out. So I worry that could still be something for Antonio Gibson, but he's still used far more in the passing game than what Derrick Henry is. And just so people know real quick, just to kind of tee this up. So when you think about the way running backs get their targets, Ian talks about it all the time as a cheat code. So on 1st and 2nd down, most running backs get about 50% of their targets. So even if you don't get any long down and distance, you don't get any of the 2-minute offense, you can be okay, especially if your team is going above and beyond in the way they're handling you, because typically on first and second down, you don't get a target per route rate of 30% like Gibson seeing. So that tells you they're trying to get him the ball. Then if you look at long down and distance, it's actually the least valuable of all the data points that I bring you as far as what it does matter. But you're not going to get a ton of points out of being the long down and distance back in a PPR. The other role that's really important is the 2-minute. The 2-minute offense back is the one you really want to own from just a reception standpoint in a PPR format. It's the most valuable snaps for a running back are the 2-minute offense snaps. So when you hear me talk about 2-minute offense, long down and distance, early down, that kind of gives you an idea in your mind. You know what the equation is. You're like, okay, early and down is worth this, long down and distance worth this, 2 minutes worth this. You want them to have it all. Because that's where you get the uncapped upside of an 80 to 100 target season and the right offense. So if you're only getting first and second down work, you're hoping to get to the 50 reception mark, but that could still be good. And you could still potentially beat it if you're in a situation like what Gibson is, where they're trying to really design plays. So sorry for the derail, but I think that's kind of like good context really for the whole season, because people are going to hear me talking about this stuff.
You're good. And I think the McLaurin, the wide receiver 3 statement, it kind of took me a little bit back at first, but yeah, I think so, people. I mean, one of the big takeaways I had in my QB superlative piece, which you can find on PFF.com, Heinicke dropped back to pass on just 18 of his 34 snaps. I mean, that's a 53% rate. Last year in the league's most run-heavy offense, Lamar Jackson was at 51%. So obviously Heinicke runs around a little bit too, but this offense is about to go through Antonio Gibson. Doesn't mean McLaurin won't make some plays. He had that fantastic, I believe, 37-yard catch down the sideline. Like, ballers are going to ball, but McLaurin, yeah, we're not getting that Fitz magic, just centered DGAF, YOLO ball, number one receiver.
You're not going to get you're just not going to get the explosion game. You're not going to get, because I'm telling you, it was coming with Fitzpatrick. You were going to see the games where it was like, holy crap, we just saw 150 yards and 2 touchdowns from McLaurin. You're not going to get those kind of weeks, but you could, to your point, he's still going to make plays. You're going to have the 5 for 70 and you're hoping for a touchdown. That can still happen.
It sucks, people, but it's kind of like the sunk cost fallacy. Like, don't just keep starting McLaurin because you use a 3rd-round pick on him. We need to start him when it matters based on what we're projecting to happen moving forward. Don't let yesterday's mistake influence tomorrow's start-sit decision. Moving right along, we got the Raiders at the Steelers. Pittsburgh sitting as 5.5-point favorites. Game total at 48. Holy hell, Darren Waller. If you guys had, a fantasy matchup swinging in the balance last night, I think it went from like, oh my God, Derek Carr, can you please get the ball to your number one option, to thank you, Carr and Waller, for just, my goodness, Dwayne, it was one target after another. It was pretty enjoyable to watch. And, using some of the cool PFF tools we had behind the scenes, we can see truly just how ridiculous this usage was. So one of the cool things I like to look at is who is getting targets on the quarterback's first read. You said before, Dwayne, we want to find guys that are getting designed the looks. So last week we had, 8 total players get 10 plus targets as their quarterback's first read. Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb had 14. Darren Waller in third with 13. Also have Mike Williams with 12, TJ Hawkinson with 11, Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, and Keenan Allen each with 10. So, all right, people. Now, again, 13 first read targets for Darren Waller. I believe he finished with 18 overall. Now, I'm just, in your head right now, I want you to guess how many targets Darren Waller is on pace to get in this 17-game season. I'll give you 3 seconds of silence. You got your guess? Cool. 323 targets, Dwayne. That's our pace right now for Darren Waller. Maybe he doesn't finish above that, but we could be looking at the first tight end in NFL history to have a target total starting with a 2. With that said, the usage for the wide receivers was concerning, because in terms of total pass routes, we have Waller at 55. And then it fell off a freaking cliff. Brian Edwards, 39. Hunter Renfrow, 37. Henry Ruggs, 35. Zay Jones, 17. Willie Snead, 2. We also had Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake essentially in a 50-50 split down the middle. Credit to Jacobs for falling into the end zone twice. He seems to do that every single week one, the Sammy Watkins of running backs, if you will. But, Dwayne, I'm just not confident still in anyone in this offense other than Darren Waller. Go get Brian Edwards on your roster. He looked great, and I would think that the talent he displayed will earn him more targets down the line. But if week one taught us anything, is that the backfield is more split than we've seen in the past. And my goodness, this entire passing game is going through Darren Waller. So let me know if you think that we should be more on any of these other pieces, and then hit me with some Steelers goodness.
No, I mean, I think it is pretty much Darren Waller. I was interested to see, Brian Edwards get a little more involved towards the end of that game.
He looked great. It just, the usage wasn't quite there.
Yeah. So, but it's just watching the game. It's one of those where you're like, okay, there could be something there, so it's such a situation to monitor. But yeah, if you own Darren Waller, you spent, a second round pick on him. This is what you wanted to see, and you're getting it. So yeah, I think you're hitting it, the nail on the head. Josh Jacobs' gutty performance. He's obviously got a lot of issues going on. Doesn't look his normal self, but yeah, it's all about Waller in that offense. As far as Pittsburgh goes, man, so we've got a different offense, but it's pretty much the under center stuff was like, just kidding. I'm Ben Roethlisberger, not going to do that. 91% of his plays came from shotgun. Matt Canada really wanted to use more under center and all that. But what I will say, man, 34% of the passing attempts were with play action. Ben Roethlisberger last year, I don't have it in front of me, Ian, but I want to say it was like 11% of his passes. It was the worst in the league.
I think you're right, yeah.
Were play action. It was really low. It was right around 10%, folks. So forgive us if we're off by a percent or so. Moral of the story, it was last by a long way in the league. So that was encouraging, but man, the pace of play, they use so much motion and all the stuff before the snap, which is great because it can create all these, offensive mismatches. Man, only 58 plays in the game, 2.2 plays per minute, 66% pass, 34% run. So I think they're still trying to figure out what this offense is, Ian. But the big takeaway here is, man, there is no back in the league that's more of an every down back than Najee Harris. 100% of the snaps. I mean, I guess I don't really even need to say anything else, right? Like once you say 100% of the snaps, it's like, what else can I really say, about the guy? But 80% of the rushing attempts, he was in a route on 82% of dropbacks, 10% targets, only 10% targets per route run. So it's not like they're designing a lot of things for him. But look, when you get a young player on the field all the time, and guys, Buffalo's defense is not a bad defense. And that was it. And it was also a game where the Steelers knew, like, you're going to have to keep scoring points. You can never relax in that game. Like, we got, Taylor Heineke on the other side of the field. No, you got Josh Allen. So I think that does dictate some of the game plan. Last note that I would put out there on the Steelers, and I know I'm heavy utilization here, guys, but I just got through writing this thing, and there's so many goodies like for you to go check out. But Deontay Johnson, man, only out there for 84% of the routes because he did get hurt. That's the one thing you got to watch out. Got knocked off the field a few times. But man, targets per route run, 31%. So when you guys hear me say that, it's obviously exactly what I mean. For the time that the receiver's on the field running a route, meaning the quarterback could have thrown him a ball, he was targeted on 31% of those. And I love that metric because when you have some players that aren't getting on the field as much and you're trying to figure out, well, what could they be like if they could be on the field more, it can be a good indicator. Now, it's a stat that will move around on you week to week. You really want like more of a 3 or 4 week sample size, but all we had was week one. So I'm excited to share week one, but 31% for Deontay is huge. 32% of the team targets, still that short ADOT, which we were wondering, hey, can somebody getting those short passes in this offense succeed when we're going to see more under center? Well, the under center thing went away. It was really more like the Steelers offense from last year, just kind of dressed up with some different things. So I think Deontay's great. Claypool's routes jumped up to 82%, which he had been down in the 60s, high 60s and low 70s last year. So I think that's going to be a positive thing. It didn't necessarily show up for him in the box score, but Juju's the guy never leaving the field. I know everybody wants Juju to be dead, but 100% of the routes, 23% of the targets, he was second on the team. So it's still going to be a 3-way split here between these guys. But this offense is going to need to figure out what it's going to be, Ian, because if they do decide to go slower and they decide to run the ball more, then one of these guys is going to be the odd receiver out every week. Like there's just no getting around it. We're not going to have a situation where we can, if you own one and I own one and somebody else owns one, we all just start them every week. We could start facing situations where we're like, do I want to play Claypool or do I want to play someone else? So that's going to be the thing to really be monitoring over the next couple of weeks.
To Juju, he had one particular play where I think he broke 2 tackles, and like that's just been missing from him, that kind of yak ability. Claypool skied up and Moss, Tre'Davious White on one, like he's the man. And Deontay, like we've been talking about all off season, you know, if you don't worry about the freaking drops, which he hasn't been doing in the year 2021, you have a great receiver. So yeah, man, it's going to be tough if the volume's not going to be there for the guys, but plenty of good offensive pieces for Pittsburgh in real life. And that was a great win to see them get after a lot of people were already starting to write them off in the offseason.
Sorry about the alarm. That was, hey, it's time to start your pod with Ian, but we went early.
I think it was also just saying like, hey, yeah, might be an issue with these wide receivers, Dwayne. It's all coming back
We've
together.
got an alarm going off.
Yep. 49ers at the Eagles. San Fran sitting as 3.5 point favorites. Opened at 48 points with the game total that is up to 50. So it was interesting today because, you know, Dwayne and I talked about this San Francisco team a lot on the Waiver Wire podcast, so I won't go too deep here. But our PFF NFL reporter, Doug, is it Keed? I should know this.
Doug, I believe so. I believe so. I was thinking it was Kayed, but you're probably right.
Either way, Doug, great his job. And as someone with a fellow hard last name to pronounce sometimes, I'm going to give myself a pass on that one. But basically, like I just tweeted, it would be a lot easier to believe that Ayuk was having this hamstring problem. That's why he didn't play if he wasn't out there returning punts. Like special teams to me is the position group. Like your best players don't play special teams. Dwayne, like when I was in high school, man, sophomore year, I'm out there on like every single special team. Senior year, I remember like just, I don't have good hands. That's why I played defense. And I remember they put me out there on kick return. Before a game one time, I was just like, Coach, I don't feel confident if they kick this ball to me. Like, put someone else in there. He said, okay, Ian, sounds good. Like, Brandon Ayuk was not on punt return because he wanted to be out there. He was on punt return because he is a backup receiver at this point, or he's just the number 3 rotating with Trent Sherfield. So I don't mean pure backup, but either way, he is not the number 1. That is Deebo Samuel, people. I am not buying Brandon Ayuk being limited with a hamstring injury, because if that was the case, why was he out there to begin with? So I really do think Trent Sherfield, as annoying as it is that, you know, we didn't know about this until now, is going to be consistently involved as a number 2. And with this 49ers offense, almost anywhere else in the league, we wouldn't have to really worry about this because the number 3 receiver would still be out there a lot. We also have Mohamed Sanu, and we have Kyle Juszczyk playing out there a ton. Of course, we have Kittle and some other multi-tight end sets they're doing as well. So right now, Dwayne, Elijah Mitchell, I think, needs to be everyone's number 1 waiver claim. I know we talked yesterday about a roughly 25 to 30%.
Yeah, you got to bump it now.
I was about to say, I think can we go all the way up to 50?
I actually had submitted this article, and I immediately, as soon as I saw that news, I wrote one of our awesome editors, Ben Cooper. I was like, hey, man, bump that to 30 to 50%. Okay. Hey, that's what it's going to take to get him. Yeah. You know, so the way I handle these things, you know, is I play in 25 leagues. Ian and I, we've got a team together. I will go put somewhere between 25 and 50% of fab on him on every single team Wednesday night. I will win some of those. I will lose some of those. And every one will be a little different based on the team. Like if I'm sitting there stacked with 4 running backs, I'm going to go 25%, maybe a little over, just to make sure that nobody else gets them for free, but I'm not going to go nuts with my fab. If I'm on a team where I basically ignored RB2, you can bet your ass I may be at like 52, 53% trying to make sure that I get the player. And it could be maddening, folks. Next week, we talked about this yesterday, so I won't go too long. Next week, would we be surprised, Ian, if the game turns on, Trey Sermon starting the game? Like that's the crap Shanahan and Arians, man, they drive me freaking insane. Arians today with Rojo's the starter. I'm like, this is okay, whatever.
With that, I wouldn't be surprised. I am confident that at a minimum, Mitchell is going to be a part of the 2-back.
Yes.
Because that's the question. Like, was Mostert going to be the featured bell cow workhorse every snap guy? I don't think so. I think we were probably going to see him be the clear-cut number 1 guy, but I think Mitchell was probably going to flirt with, you know, that 10 touch mark, regardless of if Mostert had got hurt. So don't expect 25 carries a week, but that's fine. We were drafting both Mostert and Sermon as top 30 backs just for their role in a committee in the first place. That's now what we have on the table with Elijah Mitchell. So don't throw Trey Sermon out the window. Keep him on your squad if at all possible. But right now, Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, those are the guys we can start and we can have confidence in. And again, if you guys want more just specifics on the waiver wire way to go about Ayuk and some of these other things, check out the Tuesday pod. But Dwayne, Eagles, man. I'll start with this because I've seen a lot of people giving Hurts a ton of credit, and he does deserve it because last year he was like literally our worst graded passer in a variety of efficiency statistics, and he improved a lot with that. I will say though, Dwain, I found this stat today. He only had 109 air yards in the entire game. So hey, we don't care how he picks up the passing yards.
His ADOT was 3.6.
Let's not crown him just yet. That's all I'm saying. And now the floor is yours.
Yeah. No, I mean, here's all you need to know about Jalen Hurts, though. You need to just know that 13% of the designed rushing attempts, meaning the play was designed for him to run, not him scrambling. And then he scrambled on 7%. So when you get 20% of the team's rushing attempts going to the quarterback, it doesn't matter. His ADOT could be 0 and he's still going to be good. So Jalen Hurts, I mean, lock him in. QB5 week 1. This is exactly what you were hoping for. And yeah, there weren't a lot of air yards, but you know what? There's a lot of great stuff going on. Run after the catch. Devontae Smith was matched up against a linebacker or safety on 71% of his freaking routes. So, I mean, they're doing some nice things. Now that also scares me because I'm like, please don't like when receivers work inside so much, and this is not a BMI thing, guys, but I always worry about receivers getting hurt when they work inside. Typically the guys you see play those kind of roles are Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin's another good example. I mean, they're bigger guys, so because you can take a beating, but Devonta Smith actually looks pretty smart about how he takes contact. Man, they were designing rub routes, all sorts of stuff to him. Just to really spring him open. That's how he caught the touchdown pass, was on a nice little rub route. So I'm super excited about Devonta Smith. I think he's locked in as a wide receiver 3, but man, he's got wide receiver 2 upside already. And I wonder, are we just going to get more and more excited about Devonta Smith as the season goes on? 23% of the targets, in a route on 95% of the time, average depth of target 8.6, 55% of the air yards, 50% of the end zone targets, and 43% of the third down targets. He was Jalen Hurts' dude by far. No one else was close. On third down targets, the next closest was Goddard at 29%. End zone targets, Goddard split with him at 50%. So really, it's Devonta Smith and Goddard. Do not go for the Jalen Reagor show, folks. 71% of the routes. He's still not out there all the time. Quez Watkins is splitting. He's a first-round pick. He should be out there all the time. Him not being out there all the time tells you enough. Not saying players can't get better. Not saying they can't get better, but average depth of target, 1.2. Okay, so they're trying to scheme things up. He had one really long play off of a play like that where he actually scored a touchdown just because he had to basically run in a straight line. Now, maybe that gets his confidence going, maybe gets excited, but this story is really all about Devonta Smith and about Jalen Hurts. I will say Zach Ertz did hurt his hamstring during the game, and so we'll just have to monitor that. If he's out, Dallas Goedert gets a nice bump this week.
Yeah, Goddard goes back to where we had him all freaking summer when we kept getting the Zach Ertz Buffalo trade rumors every damn week. Yeah, the wild stat I found with Devontae Smith, and again, league low air yards in week 1, so small grain of salt, but he was one of only 5 receivers with at least 50% of the offense's air yards right there with Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Lockett. So when Hurts will start throwing downfield a little bit more, it's going to be to Devontae Smith, people. Texans at the Browns. Cleveland is up to a 12.5-point favorite after opening at 11.5. Vegas is not buying the Texans week 1.
Against the Houston juggernaut?
The Houston juggernaut.
Mark Ingram can't be stopped.
48-point game total. Yeah, people, look, we're not doing it. Other than Brandin Cooks, who looked good out there, man. And for Cooks, this year is awesome for him because he was someone that I think could be viewed as just he benefited from playing with Drew Brees, with Tom Brady, with Deshaun Watson, and one good version of Jared Goff. His only bad year came in the 1 year Goff was bad. So that's why a lot of people, even when Cooks was going as the wide receiver 40 throughout the offseason, just weren't willing to buy in. Man, these were not empty yards, man. Cooks balled out. The second drive of the game or something, he came down with this wild contested catch that I almost thought was picked, but hey, he had the catch anyway, so whatever. And then later, the one that everyone probably saw was when Tyrod extended the play, chucked it downfield again, and Cooks was able to come up with the contested play. So that's not even what we're used to. We're used to seeing defenders 10 yards behind Cooks after he cooked them. And, and he does this thing there. Oh, I hate myself for that, but whatever, people. And so anyway, look, players with more air yards in week 1. This is only on 7 targets. Tyreek Hill, DJ Chark, Darren Waller, CD Cooper, Manny Sanders, and Antonio Brown. That is freaking it. So we hope that this offense could give us one fantasy relevant receiver. It is Brandin Cooks. And so 43% air yard team share, that ranks 9th. all the numbers are pointing us in the right direction. And going up against the Browns, yeah, Denzel Ward's great. He hasn't shadowed since, I believe, week 1 of 2019, people. So in my personal ranks, I'm not, putting Cooks as a top 10 or even top 20 guy. I do think, though, where he had him before, kind of around that wide receiver 3 borderline, get him up to like that wide receiver 30 range, because, again, he's a great player with a great role and an offense that is not great, but at least is a little bit more passable than I think we thought before, Dwain. So now let's talk a little bit of Cleveland Browns, who, took the L, but damn, at least they kept this one close, because if you guys remember the last 2 week ones, they got blown out by the Ravens, blown out by the Titans. Crazy stat I heard on the broadcast. The Browns haven't won a week 1 game since 2004. So sucks, Cleveland. But hey, you gave the defending AFC champs one hell of a shot. Dwain, what stuck out to you most about that game?
Yeah, number one, you can cut Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like if we were just hoping that maybe he's the handcuff to OBJ. Once OBJ's back, there's just, I don't think there's a point. And I like the player, but a lot of you have a lot of tough decisions to make this week. So if he's a guy you have on your roster, I think you can easily cut him. Was in a route 88% of the plays, but man, only targeted on 3% of the routes he ran. Like that's abysmal. And typically when you see a number like that, it's not just like they were trying to lock Donovan Peoples-Jones down with double coverage. The Chiefs probably don't even know who he is. So it's a situation where if you were kind of hoping like he was your stash, I rotate stashes quick. Like I don't need a lot of data to know. It's like I'm moving on from him, going to the next player. And as far as the Browns, just the big thing, man, is like, God, this backfield, like it's so, I love both players, but it just irritates me. Like, why do they have to be together? Like these are 2 fantasy RB1s playing on the same team. Nick Chubb, 52% of the snaps, Kareem Hunt, 47%, rushing 56% to Chubb, 22% to Kareem Hunt. So Chubb's the clear leader in the clubhouse around rushing, but then routes, 48% to Kareem Hunt, 27% to Nick Chubb, targets 10% versus 7% in favor of Kareem Hunt. And so here's the part that I don't like the most, Ian, is Kareem Hunt also, and we saw this last year, 75% of the short down and distance snaps. And so when I say short down and distance, folks, what that means is it's 1 or 2 yards to go and it's second, third, or fourth down, right? Because that's most likely a rundown. On second down, it's a little less because teams will take shots with play action. Typically, once you get to third and fourth down, those are running downs in the NFL these days, even as we progress towards, hey, you should just pass every single play and just use play action and never run. It's still the case. So it's just kind of a maddening thing. And my only point being here, Nick Chubb scored 2 touchdowns to save you. If he doesn't score those 2 touchdowns, it's going to be a rough week. Now, the positive you can say is, well, they don't have to play the Chiefs every week, and he survived that. And that's true. But Kareem Hunt kind of got written off a little bit this year because people overdrafted him last year. And so what happens when you overdraft a commodity? The next year, the reaction is, well, now I'm just going to let it slide. He probably slid a little too far. This is the exact kind of matchup that you were looking for with Kareem Hunt, because he plays 85% of the 2-minute offense, plays 67% of the long down and distance. He's the guy that's out there in the passing situations. So when you own these 2 players, you're always going to start Nick Chubb. But when you have Hunt, it's something where you're kind of looking for, okay, is the line big? Are they dogs, by a lot? And so I think this is a game when you start looking at it, opened at 48, it's getting up to 50. It's still going to be competitive at 3.5. We saw what the Lions running backs did. The Lions running backs destroyed the 49ers. So I think this is a big week for both Chubb and Hunt.
Hold on. You're talking 49ers, bro?
Oh, shoot. Yeah,
we're facing the Texans.
Texans. It's even better. Yeah, sorry.
Spots.
Yeah, sorry. I was looking at the Eagles and 49ers. So, yeah, okay, no, it's an absolute smash. It doesn't matter.
Everything you said in the first 90% still applies.
Yes, and it's the Texans. Sorry. Like, I didn't scroll down far enough. My bad. Yeah.
All good, brother.
But, yeah, but no, it's even better, right? It's 48% total and 12.5-point favorites. I mean, this is a huge Chubb game, actually.
And you better have a good reason, I think, for putting Kareem Hunt on the bench. I think when we do our start sit on Sunday, Dwain, the majority of questions with Kareem Hunt, we're going to be saying start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And now we have another atrocious team to talk about. Broncos at the Jaguars. Denver sitting as 6-point favorites, game total of 45. And you want to talk split backfields, like Dwain, I saw you tweet this and use a table from utilization report. But yeah, Denver 50-50 right down the middle, pretty much everything. That was their exact overall snap splits. Melvin Gordon had 11 carries and 3 targets. Javonte Williams, 14 carries and 1 target. Credit to the Broncos offensive line. Only the Eagles averaged more yards before contact per carry. Obviously, Teddy can move around a little bit. He had a couple nasty stiff arms last week, which I enjoyed seeing.
It doesn't even make sense. Teddy with a stiff arm, with his two gloves.
Right. Yeah. I was just like, he's not giving you necessarily, the Jalen Hurts, the Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, like read option giant holes. So that's why I'm like, Eagles average more yards before contact per carry. But like, I always see there's Lamar, there's the Cardinals and the Ravens are always at the top. And then you see the 49ers and it's like, okay, they're not getting that from Jimmy G. They're getting that because of Kyle Shanahan. So to me, that tells you a lot about the Broncos scheme and their offensive line, but also credit to these backs. They were 6th in yards after contact per carry combined. So Javonte managed to force 4 missed tackles on his runs. And now we get the Jaguars, who I just think, until we see any sort of evidence that week 1 was a fluke, we need to start guys against this defense with reckless abandon people. So I think at this point, both backs are in the upside RB3 territory. And again, we're doing the ranks tonight, but I'm going to try to squeeze both of these guys in my top 30, top 32. We need to try to exploit this matchup as much as possible. Thankfully, Jerry Jeudy not out the whole year, but for 4 to 6 weeks. That's obviously not going to be great. KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick, Dwayne and I talked about this on the waiver wire pod. It's just going to be tough to expect Teddy in this offense to enable more than, I think, one fantasy relevant receiver, and that should be Courtland Sutton. So unfortunately, Sutton caught, the James Bradbury shadow last week. Bradbury historically does very well against those sort of big body, more physical receivers, expecting more of a bounce back here in week 2 and beyond. So Courtland Sutton, don't be surprised if he comes back in a major way, and try to find a way to get these running backs in your starting lineup. Now, Dwayne, this was one of the only game I still have to watch is a little bit more of that Rams-Bears game, although I caught a good amount of it in real time. And I will say this about Trevor Lawrence. He made a couple boneheaded plays, but man, you saw the talent with, the touchdown passes. Man Hurts, freaking Jones at the end, and DJ Chark down the sideline. Like, if they can
what a great football name, by the way. Man Hurts.
Hurts.
That's a great, it's like I hurt man.
Football guy, no doubt about it. But like, as bad as that week 1 was, I still think, if you're a Trevor Lawrence fan, like, nothing about what happened should be making you nervous about his future.
Yeah. I think the big thing with Lawrence really is we just want to see more of the rushing. Only 6% design rush attempts. If you had asked me, I would have thought that number would be closer to 10, 12%, something like that. And 0% scrambles. So if he could just get the legs going, what he's doing in the air is enough. I mean, a 9.2 ADOT, average time to throw 2.6. I mean, those are 2 really good numbers together when you think about how far he's pushing down the field, and he's not taking 3 seconds to do it. Yards per attempt was down to 6.5, but it's a situation where I'm mostly going to fade the Jaguars this week just because it is, I think, a tougher matchup. But if I were to play someone, the guy that really stood out to me, Ian, from a utilization perspective, is really DJ Chark. So, I mean, DJ Chark had 196 air yards this past weekend. Now, they couldn't hardly connect on anything. But if they continue to try, DJ Chark is, in my opinion, he's the most explosive young receiver on this team that can do everything. I like Laviska Shenault, but he's really more of an underneath, slot type weapon. And he's not a blazer. He's a rugged player is the way I would describe Laviska Shenault. But 25% targets per route run for DJ Chark. So he and Lawrence are clearly trying to get something going there. I know Marvin Jones outscored him in the box score because he caught that touchdown later in the game. But DJ Chark also caught a touchdown. And if he could just convert more of that, I believe it was 2 of 10 targets that he caught. So they just were not on the same page. But anytime you see that type of air yards and you see an opportunity where there could be potential chemistry, starting to get going between 2 young players, that's something that I want to be a part of. So it's really the DJ Chark show for me in this receiver core.
Yeah, only Tyreek Hill had more overall air yards on the week, and that's good company to be in. I realized that, a little bit more prayer yard variety with Chark compared to Tyreek with Mahomes last week, but still, people, it's a hell of a lot better than, not having that many air yards like the rest of the Jags receivers. moving right along. We got the Saints at the Panthers. New Orleans sitting as 3.5-point favorites. Game total down to 44 after opening at 46. So we touched on Jameis and Juwan Johnson in our waiver wire pod. Jameis was awesome. 5 touchdowns. That's great. Also, the fewest amount of passing yards in NFL history for someone that threw 5 touchdowns. So let's see what happens in a game where they're not able to pretty much instill their will on the ground and give Jameis these wide open play action opportunities. And with Juwan Johnson, what was his total snaps, Dwayne? 12, 10?
I don't have it in front of me, but yes, it was really low. It was like, I'll pull it up while you're talking. You keep going.
All of those ill-fated Adam Troutman best ball teams from the summer, man, just Undertaker jiffing all over the place because he was out there 82% of the way. It's still not ideal. I mean, we wanted Troutman getting those targets that Juwan Johnson was getting as well. So I'm not saying Troutman's like right back in the top 10 discussion or anything yet, but it was encouraging. I don't think we're going to see him completely phased out of this offense, but for right now, it's just the Alvin Kamara show, but boy, is it the Alvin Kamara show. 73% snap rate. I mean, he only hit 70% last year in 5 of 15 games. Sean Payton, naturally, like smartly, has always been hesitant to use Kamara in this true workhorse role until the games really start to matter. But I think his hand's just a little bit forced at this point. So even in the first 3 quarters of this game, because this one did turn to a rout, pretty quickly and definitely in the fourth quarter. But Kamara, in the first 3 quarters, he held leads in snaps, 41 versus 13, carries 18 versus 7, and targets 4 versus 1 over the artist known as Tojo. So Tony Jones, still good to have on your bench. He's one of the better handcuffs out there. I don't think we're getting any standalone value with him, though.
Kamara, 64% of the rushing attempts through the third quarter. I looked at that as well. That, folks, his high for his career has been 45. Like, Kamara's probably, if McCaffrey's not the RB1, it's Kamara at this point. Like Kamara's he's going to finish ahead of Dalvin Cook.
Wow. Big words from Mr. McFarland. That's still our top 3. I don't think it matters too much.
I mean, you're still going to love Dalvin Cook, but it's tough. It's just fun because you don't usually get to have an elite player like that you actually get to put in as an upgrade in your upgrade column. It's like, how do you upgrade Alvin Kamara? But it did actually happen.
RB3 to RB2. Let's get crazy, people. I like it. All right, Dwayne. We got the Panthers. I'm not saying that Sam Darnold was fantastic. He had a much better first half and second half. I will go there. Did some good things out there, but I like to think, Dwayne, you got something good to say about our boy DJ Moore.
Yeah. Well, Sam Darnold, what was crazy was 19% of the designed rushing attempts. Like, that threw me off. I actually sent a note to our folks that run our awesome tool, just saying, is this right? Like, Sam Darnold's getting all these design rushing looks. But then I thought back last year, even Teddy had a few of those. So, I mean, maybe that's right. But 28% play action, for Darnold, 8.1 ADOT. So, I mean, it's a situation where they didn't have to throw a lot. I mean, they were ahead 59% of the plays during the game, and they only threw 50% of the time whenever they were playing with the lead. So I do think there's some meat on the bone for Darnold and this passing game. So it's something just to keep an eye on. And look, as soon as I say that, Darnold's going to come out and suck, and then you guys are all going to bomb me on Twitter and fine, whatever. We all know that Darnold has sucked through this point in his career. But yes, DJ Moore, man, led the team in routes, led the team in targets, 24%, led the team in he was second in targets per route run, technically 1% behind Terrace Marshall,
there we go,
Jr. So you got to make sure you get your Terrace Marshall Jr. love. But man, it's just, and we talked about it a little bit, so I'll finish this one up quick. But 11.4 ADOT, 34% of the air yards. What I love about DJ Moore this year, and we talked about it in the preseason, he's working more short and underneath. And so it's almost like the snaps that were going to Curtis Samuel last year are now kind of being divvied up between CMC and DJ Moore, and who's attacking intermediate versus who's attacking short. And at least in this game, one data point, Robbie Anderson was really being used to more stretch the field. And if DJ Moore truly is in that role, we could really see some good things. 25% of his targets came on play action. But it was Terrace Marshall. We mentioned this. 50% of Sam Darnold's third down targets went to Terrace Marshall. So that tells you he's got some trust in the rookie.
Yeah, DJ Moore is someone I was lower on than most this offseason because I thought he was going to have the same, kind of one-trick pony field stretcher role he had last year. Seems like that is Robbie now, and I will accordingly be moving DJ up and up, firmly in that upside wide receiver 2 discussion week in and week out. Love that they are finally giving him the sort of, featured target share that a player of his talents deserves. We got the Los Angeles Rams at the Indianapolis Colts. Rams sitting as 4-point favorites, game total at 47.5. Darrell Henderson, 94% snap rate, people. 94%. Only guy that beat that was Mr. 100%. Najee Harris got 16 of 17 RB rushes, only one target. This is not the Todd Gurley, we're going to break fantasy football role. Like, he was doing a ton of great things in the passing game. Obviously, Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, they want to chuck that ball 50 yards downfield. They're not going to waste time, going check downs to Henderson all game long. But with that said, man, I think we're looking at a Dave Montgomery, Damian Harris type at worst, as long as this persists. But with that said, like, Sony Michel has been there for a good 3-4 weeks. Dwayne, you're muted. I think you're trying to yell at me or you're talking to someone. Either way, it's all good because
I was going to say, I rank him ahead of those guys based on this usage. Like, I mean, it's going to be something where some of the targets are going to come around. To your point, this offense is designed to go downfield more. I mean, if you look at Stafford's ADOT, it was more than what you ever really see from Jared Goff. All the things we hoped for happened. Basically, everybody added 2 yards to their depth of target. You still had the run after the catch stuff you want with the Rams. You hit the big plays. The offense looks so good. This offense is clearly going to be better than the Bears, right? Yeah. I mean, so that's an immediate. Give me him over David Montgomery.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this many snaps. I think Darrell Henderson, man, right now, like, you got to consider him. He's a high-end RB2. I know he didn't show up huge in the box score this past week, but in this offense, he's going to have his games. If you can go get Darrell Henderson right now because somebody thinks, oh, he's just the running back. He's the running back that went in the dead zone right now that I'm looking at, that I'm like, it's going to be the one that pops. Every year we draft 7 or 8 in that range. 6 of them bust, 2 of them hit. He's going to be one of the 2 that hits this year. Darrell Henderson is it as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, I was saying Montgomery Harris, that's at worst. That's if Sony Michel ends up coming around more and takes more of that pass game work that's already a little bit smaller. I'm already taking them ahead of those guys for this week over Saquon, over Miles Sanders, Gaskin, Hunt, Mike Davis, the Tampa Bay dudes, Edmonds, James Robinson, Josh Jacobs. We're starting Darrell Henderson over all those guys. If we keep seeing a snap rate starting with 9 and Sony just doesn't play, we're going to be talking about legit RB1 status before too long, people, and maybe high end at that. Like, we just don't see players getting this sort of snap rate. And this is something that Sean McVay really before last year was doing consistently. In his first 3 years with the Rams, McVay's RB1 played at least 60% of the offensive snaps in 48 of 52 games. Even in the 4 games that didn't hit, he still had a guy going 50% plus. So they want to lead back. I think McVay's only problem with Henderson, and he's been vocal about this, has been the dude's inability to stay healthy. He's healthy right now and he's getting fed. So it's not the easiest matchup, but I will be personally insulted if you find a way to put Henderson on your bench, people. And maybe you have, this sick 5-team league roster and you're going to show me, your 6 top 12 wide receivers or that. But just realize, like, we don't see this sort of usage in the NFL. So when we do in a great offense, like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, we wondered, we all knocked Henderson down when Sony Michel came to the table. Sony's not an issue right now. So until he is, we need to treat Henderson as, like you said, Dwayne, an upside RB2 at the absolute worst. And then just quickly, otherwise, great stuff from Matthew Stafford. I think he's still that, Tom Brady tier kind of in the QB. I know Brady's just having these great matchups, so we're ranking him a little bit higher, but he's Matthew Stafford, probably going to fit in your top 12, top 13 QBs more weeks than not, with a sort of upside and 3 touchdown passing upside he's going to have. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, great. I think it's going to be tough to see, a number 3 wide receiver consistently emerge in this group. And the final note, I guess, would be Tyler Higbee getting all the snaps. Sorry for all you Jacob Harris truthers out there throughout the offseason, but it's looking like the Higbee show. And he is someone that kind of was in that tight end dead zone. We weren't sure exactly if he was going to be, picking it up a lot, but Tyler Higbee, Dwayne, I think is someone that we're going to be ranking at, between tight end 6 and tight end 8 more weeks than not here moving forward. So
and he could put, this could be the best tight end season we've seen in a long time, because we've talked about Hockenson and we've talked about Pitts, and now you add in Higbee actually getting the routes. They're good players. Like, we could see 7 really good tight ends this year. Noah Fant could do it too if he just was on the field more. So yeah, I'm with you on Higbee. He was one of the things that popped the most to me when I was doing my research.
Well, let's talk Colts. And I don't think we have much to say about the passing game here, but a lot of interesting nuggets here going on with not a 3 RB backfield, but Dwayne, only 2.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the big thing, is that you just don't have Jordan Wilkins or Marlon Mack involved, because that was a real bummer. So you got Jonathan Taylor getting to the 60% of rushing attempts. He was at 61%. You have 32% of those to Hines. So if Taylor can stay at that 60% mark and maybe push up towards 70, even if he's not getting a ton of passing down work, it really does help him. But the beauty of what you're seeing with Taylor is he's really being treated kind of like what we talked about with Antonio Gibson, 37% targets per route run rate. That is really high. That shows that they're designing plays for him. In fact, one of them was a screenplay. 3 of them were play action, and there's an overlap. One of those play action passes was a screenplay to Jonathan Taylor. So that tells you what you need to know. They want to get him the ball. And you know what? They don't really care to get the ball to their receivers. Now, maybe part of that is Carson Wentz still trying to get on the same page. I mean, Carson Wentz with a 5.8 ADOT, but still somehow taking nearly 3 seconds to throw. Like, that doesn't even compute in my brain. Like, it's not working yet. He's still trying to figure things out. And they just don't have an alpha, man. Like Michael Pittman, you and I talked about him. I like him, but I just don't see him as somebody that's going to demand all these looks. You know, I like Paris Campbell, but it's done, people. You can cut him. There's no reason to keep carrying him. Zach Pascal got lucky. He caught a couple of touchdowns. I don't want to say he got lucky. He caught 2 touchdown passes in the NFL. Dwayne, have you ever caught a touchdown pass in the NFL? No, you haven't. So Zach Pascal, clearly a badass in life, and you're not, Dwayne. But I don't like any of the receivers, to your point. So I think we're going to continue to see this. I think it's kind of like what we talked about with the Lions. This Hines and Taylor are probably 2 of the best players on their team. Maybe they're 2 best players. And so I think you're going to continue to see them try to find ways to get the ball to both players. And I think you can use both of them.
Jonathan Taylor, like, he's ahead of Nick Chubb now moving forward, right?
Yes.
He just had 24 combined carries and targets in a game where the Colts were down by multiple scores, like, for most of the afternoon. God forbid they ever get up in the game.
Dude, he was on pace for a lot more. In the second half, Nyheim Hines was way more involved. But yeah, no, and here's like, when I take like this, like, life hack kind of view of it, I have one back that competes with Kareem Hunt. I have the other one that competes with Nyheim Hines. Problem solved. I'm going to go with the guy that doesn't have Kareem Hunt on his team. As much as I love Nyheim Hines, he's not Kareem Hunt.
I will be interested to see what the split looks like in a more normal positive game script. Because I guess if they're going to feed the backfield this many touches, similar to the Lions, like, both guys are going to be fine regardless. But I do wonder, with Hines getting that extension, getting 9 carries in this game, if this is actually going to be more of a, 60-40, 50 split, like, regardless of the game.
And the thing is, I think it can be, because of the point you made. There's not a third guy.
Right.
So I think it still works.
Yeah, that was the big thing, people. That was my whole, as someone that was a little bit down on Jonathan Taylor, and everyone joined me in August, I thought, for the wrong reasons, when, Carson Wentz and Quentin Nelson were getting hurt. But yeah, that was the problem. It was that every back going ahead of Jonathan Taylor was either the workhorse or sharing the backfield with only one other guy. We were projecting him to be sharing it at least a little bit, at least, 15% or so with Mack, with Wilkins. The fact he is not absolutely huge. And also note that he did have a touchdown nullified last week. So it actually was going to be a bigger game for him if, either his teammate didn't hold, or if the ref, decided not to be a dick there and was facing Jonathan Taylor in his fantasy game. So moving right along, we got the Bills at the Dolphins. Buffalo 3-point favorites, game total 48. So this was one of the games on my game by game breakdown pod that I hadn't watched yet. So I kind of wasn't too confident in saying, like, all right, like, expect Josh Allen to get back to normal. Now I am. Guys, this offense is going to be absolutely fine moving forward. Like, the Pittsburgh Steelers probably just got like another holding call in the time that I started this. Like, the amount of plays that got left on the field last week that just got overturned by the refs was getting pretty freaking ridiculous. So for me, Josh Allen, not nearly as bad as some of those numbers indicated. Could have had Emmanuel Sanders on a potential 50-yard touchdown, just missed the guy. So we still saw, all the sort of just friendly, fantasy friendly usage out of him, running the ball and just throwing the piss out of the ball. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a great defense, and they played a great game. Give them that hat tip. I don't think we see the same thing against, say, Dolphins defense that last time we saw, couldn't keep this Bills offense under 50. So I think Josh Allen and company get back to balling in a major way. And that might just include Devin Singletary. One of the biggest, surprises we saw on Sunday was Zach Moss being healthy scratched. And look, the reason why we couldn't get behind this backfield seemingly to start the year was because we were projecting a 50-50 split. And in an offense where Josh Allen doesn't check down and where he runs more than just about anybody inside the 10-yard line, you just can't deal with 50% snaps in that. 73% though? Okay, now we can start getting behind that. So Devin Singletary, I think he does now leap into the top 30 phase. I'm still a little hesitant to put him top 24, but hey man, this is a great offense and Devin Singletary is the lead back for Meow. So, could Moss be active next week? Absolutely. Could Breida get a bigger role? Sure. But for right now, man, it's looking like Devin Singletary is the RB1 in Buffalo. And hey man, he's good. Like since he came into the league, we got, among all running backs with at least 100 carries. He's tied for 17th in PFF rushing grade, tied for 7th in missed tackles forced per carry, tied for 10th in yards per carry, tied for 12th in yards after contact per carry. So Josh Allen, don't sweat it. Devin Singletary, if you happen to grab him, in the late rounds as like a 0 RBer, you're feeling good about it because I think that at worst, he can now give us some solid RB3 value more weeks than not. Now, Dwain, we had our first waddle of the year with the Dolphins. Great to see. Running back committee maybe wasn't so great to see, but at least we got Will Fuller coming back. And before I throw it over to you, do you know who the Jetpack Galeo dude is on Twitter?
Yeah, he's awesome.
He is absolutely awesome. You guys should follow him at Jetpack Galeo. That's Galileo. But he's a big fan of like astronomy and telescopes and all that shit. And he has like a method for predicting Will Fuller weeks based on the moon. So per Jetpack Galeo, there's a 98% chance we have a 98% waxing give us this Sunday, which means we need to start Will Fuller or perish. So look, people, I don't make the rules, but the moon and the tides, they happen to predict Will Fuller big week. So take that for what you will. That's my little beyond the box score note on the Dolphins, Dwayne. Try to top that.
Yeah. I can't top that. But what I can say is the encouraging things for the Dolphins really quick. They threw the ball 79%. Yeah, 79% of the time, even when leading, right? So it's a team that's told us they're going to throw the ball, they're going to try to throw the ball more and be aggressive. And they did that. Now, they were still 56% pass, 44% run for the game, but they led 26% of plays. The game was within 3 points for 74% of plays. So it's not like they had to do a ton. But overall, like I'm just encouraged with what we're seeing. Tua's ADOT 9.9, time to throw 2.5, 37% play action. It's funny. It's like everybody's caught on now. It's play action and you don't have to run as much. Like every team is finally like starting to gear up and get into this mode. And so I still think Tua has sneaky, upside later in the season. If you're in a super flex, I still like him. You already mentioned we get Will Fuller back this week. So I think that's a positive. As far as Waddle goes, like did really well, finished in the top 25. And I didn't update for last night's games, but he was in the top 25. So let's say he was a top 30 receiver in his first game in the NFL. That's really great. 75% of his routes came from the slot. The only thing I don't know, Ian, that I just want to keep an eye on is what happens with Fuller back, because last week in 12 personnel look, Waddle picked up an additional 19 snaps. If you take those snaps away and all of a sudden he gets half of those, or he doesn't get any of those, and those all go to Fuller and Parker, and they're the guys working outside, that could be really a damper on Waddle, especially in games where, like last week, where you had the Dolphins leading. And so they used more 12. They even threw a little 13 out there. And so that's just something I'm going to keep an eye on. So if you've got an option besides Waddle this week that you really like, don't feel like you have to force him. I'm not saying be afraid of him. I mean, he was out there 93% of the routes last week. But to give you an example, Albert Wilson was the third receiver. And if Waddle could be the third receiver next week, Wilson was only out there for 60% of the routes. So that's something that we got to watch for Waddle. That's going to be a key thing. Let's see what happens with Fuller. It'll definitely be in the utilization report next week. The only other thing I'll say is just drop Mike Gesicki. There's no point, folks. There's just no points. Ian actually already told you this before the season started. Only on a route 60% of the time. Targets per route only at 17%. So you heard us talk on the podcast yesterday. If you haven't, go back and listen. There is a magic equation for tight ends. This is going in the opposite direction. You want to be at 20% targets per route run. You want to be over 80% of routes. Over 80% of the routes, over 20% targets per route run. So I actually had it right. Why do I have to repeat myself when I do things right? I do enough things wrong that I have to repeat myself for. So Gesicki's just really not somebody that you want to be. Honestly, I would rather own Adam Troutman right now than Mike Gesicki. So go make that move, get it done while you're sitting here. Listen to us if you can, if you don't got to wait on waiver wires. The only other thing I will say, just real quick, Myles Gaskin, it's the old Patriots 50-30-20 share. It's just what you got to do. If you're an old Patriots coach, you have to give 50% to one back, 30 to the next, and 20 to the next. It looks really good on your spreadsheet. Makes you feel good. QA guy comes up at the end of the game, goes, "Yep, coach, 50-30-20." And coach says, "Yes, mission accomplished." For whatever reason, I don't know. But the thing with Gaskin, I will say, 29% targets per route run. So that's really good. And that is something that Jay Moyer did say, another great follow on Twitter. If you guys want to understand how NFL running games work, oh my God,
absolutely.
It's the best. Like, he shows you how duo works, wide zone, where the mesh points, the cuts, all that stuff. Like, I don't know anybody that does like breaking down that stuff and reading the next level defender than Jay. And he really loves Myles Gaskin. And he specifically talked about how he could see Myles Gaskin having 20% of the targets. And I said, you're freaking insane. There's no way Myles Gaskin's going to have that many targets in this offense with all these weapons. Week 1, Myles Gaskin, 19% of the targets. So I have to give Jay a shout out and tell him, you're right, I was wrong. 86% of the 2-minute snaps in the offense, 50% of the long down and distance, but only 38% of the rushing attempts. So, but you want the receiving role on this offense. So Malcolm Brown is an annoyance. Salvon Ahmed is an annoyance. Myles Gaskin's the only player to own. I still got him as a low RB2, but if he were to start to take over from either of those other players just a little bit more in the rushing department, he could have some upside.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys can check out my, just breakdown of every team's backfield situation up on PFF.com on Wednesday. That was basically my takeaway. I said upside RB3, but basically, sorry, people, he's probably not going to have, the same sort of production you drafted him for if you did your draft a month ago, before the preseason. Still useful. Just, again, don't be necessarily treating him as the guy you drafted him to be. Realize he's still the lead back, but he's not getting that 3-down role that he had for bunches last year. Second lowest scoring game total of the week. Patriots at Jets. New England opened as 3.5-point favorites. That has gone up to 5.5. And that low game total I mentioned before is sitting at 43 points. So this backfield is going to be interesting. Similar to the 49ers, I don't think we got the whole story necessarily in week 1. Damon Harris looked good. 54% snaps, 23 carries, 3 targets. Unfortunately, he had the late game fumble that ended up leading, pretty much, you could argue, definitely didn't help win him the game. We'll put it that way. James White, 37% snaps, 4 rushes, 7 targets. We can live with that. Again, 2 RB backfields are great, but Ramondre Stevenson, not only active, but he got an early carry. The problem was he fumbled it. So, Dwain, I guess what I'm worried about is they weren't going into this game anticipating it to be Harris and White. Stevenson was going to have a role. I don't think they just gave him a first quarter carry. And if he didn't fumble, that was going to be his last carry of the game. So I want to know what the split was going to be before the fumble. And if it was anything close to a getting Stevenson involved, that's not going to be good for Damon Harris. We need him to have pretty much, a large percentage of this team's rush attempts in order for him to pay off as this top 20, 15 back that I think some people want him to be. So I'm holding steady. I think last week I had him as my RB22, RB23 or something like that. I still think he's a low end RB2. Maybe we can bump him up a little bit because this matchup is looking great. 5.5-point favorites. This is the type of game script that we can expect him to clear the 20 touch mark with ease. I'm just worried if it's going to be Stevenson or JJ Taylor eventually making this a 3-back committee, because that's where things become problematic. And again, just looking at the snaps right now, everything's fine. I'm just not convinced that that's the level we're going to see Stevenson involved with in future weeks. So curious if you think, think
it's going to happen.
The Fugazi, Dwayne. It's a Fugazi.
They're going to use 3
Fugazi,
backs.
whatever.
Fugazi, yeah. Hey, forget about it. It's going to be a 3-way backfield. Look, there are certain things, and I get it. We have these debates in the industry, right? Like how strong is a coaching tendency really, and what can break it? Talent can break a coaching tendency, and I think Damien Harris is a good player. But remember, this is a backfield that's had some pretty good players through the years. And Bill Belichick, there's certain things that he values and there's certain things he's looking for. And he likes to have multiple backs that can do everything. And I think part of that is because if one gets hurt, it's just, okay, next man up kind of mentality. So I think there's going to be 3 backs involved. I think this will be one of the higher carry, shares that you're going to see all year from Damien Harris. And it doesn't mean he can't be a good player, but he's going to be what you just said. He's going to be a low end RB2 dependent on scoring touchdowns. Now, what I did like, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I just remember because I just wrote this, his targets per route run they were better than what they have been in the past. So maybe they get him a little more work, but we know James White's going to be out there in all long down distance, 2-minute. I do think Ramondre Stevenson or JJ Taylor, one of the other guys, will be a thing. But you know what? You got Damien Harris in the 8th or 9th round. And if you went hero RB, stacked up a bunch of receivers and tight ends, and Damien Harris is your RB2, you're still okay. Just you're going to plug him in there and you got to live with it. Is he going to score touchdowns or not? I mean, you got a back that in the 8th or 9th round that a lot of people ended up with in the 5th or 6th round with other dead zone backs that were taken. And you really got kind of the same profile 3 rounds later. So high five you. You're still leading and there's still a chance to upgrade your backfield. But yeah, I'm with you, Ian. Just low end RB2. Going to be real tough for him to ever have that top end RB1 game, except the exceptional game where he might score 3 touchdowns, which this isn't a Tom Brady-led Patriots team. So it's just going to be tough.
Now, on the other sideline, we got the Jets. I think we can just write off these running backs for the time being, all 3 being used.
You're not going to let me talk about Ty Johnson? You hate Ty Johnson. Like, you just,
what did he do other than lead snaps? Oh, yeah, Ty Johnson killed it in my point per snap league, Dwain. Come on. Tevin Coleman is the one with the most carries, and he's probably going to contend. All right, pitch me on Ty Johnson then, Dwain. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, snaps 54% to Ty Johnson, 26%
Ty fucking Johnson
to Tevin Coleman, 25% to Michael Carter. I really don't care either. You shouldn't be starting any of these players. Michael Carter is the one I want to stash. Yes. Ty Johnson, I'm also okay. I'm not carrying Tevin Coleman. I just, Tevin Coleman, whatever, 71% of the short down and distance. He's literally a between the tackles runner on a team that right now has a lot of problems, and they're probably going to trail a lot. So I like Ty Johnson and Carter better. Don't want to be starting either one of them. Ty's completely owning the passing downs, though. 80% of long down distance, 91% 2 minutes. Anyway, we've already wasted too much time. I just basically did that to make Ian mad, just so you guys know. But Zach Wilson, and thank you, Twitter. God, I should have wrote down the handle because I am perfectly willing to own my mistakes. I had tweeted earlier 4 sacks and 13 dropbacks with Mekhi Becton in the lineup. The feature, Ian, in Ultimate, where we can go in and you can type versus this player and it's on the same team. Yeah. And it's supposed to just show you the snaps like with that player. And it did, but my brain was thinking it was going to show me the snaps without that player for whatever reason. And then I made my tweet. So whatever, but still 2 sacks and 13 dropbacks once Mekhi Becton left the lineup. So, I mean, that's he was sacked 13% of the time anyway. Well, it was 15% over those last 13 dropbacks. That's the big problem for Zach Wilson right now. This team needs to get a running game going because it does. Hopefully it can protect Zach Wilson. So it's a downgrade, man, to the overall offense, losing Becton like that. You don't want to overreact to an offensive lineman, but I mean, they were going to build an offense that could shelter Wilson. And now I worry it's like brick by brick. It's just falling apart and it's turning into, well, Wilson just drop back and win the game. You don't want that, for Wilson in his rookie season. You really want him to get to operate in a situation where you're using the play action, you're hitting the bootlegs, you're doing the rollouts, you're doing all these things to really give him an advantage versus the defense once the ball is snapped and, pre-snap as well. And you're just not going to get, it's just going to be tougher with the way things are going when they're going to drop behind. So it's funny, Ian, because Corey Davis, man, was my guy. Love him. And he came up with 2 touchdowns. I don't think I remember a time in my life having someone that's like one of my guys that I was super on in the preseason and they smash in week 1 and then come week 2, I'm thinking, should I sell high? Oh, no. Should I sell high like right now? Because I'm just worried about what's going to happen with the offense. Now, Becton's not gone for the season, just so you guys know. He's probably out somewhere from 4 to 6 weeks is what I read. It was a dislocated kneecap. So something obviously very painful, but he should be able to rehab and get back from. But 6 games it's a long time, man. So I'm a little worried about all the Jets receivers. I mostly want to fade them. I own Corey Davis so much he's probably going to have to be in lineups. But everything else on the offense outside of Davis is a fade for me right now. Just quick shout out to Elijah Moore, guys. I know he didn't come up in the box score, but 85% of the routes had an ADOT of 22.8, 25% of the air yards, only 12% of the targets, but 22% of the targets on third down. He did lead the team in third down targets. So I still think you're going to get something out of Elijah Moore. And I know you're just like, well, you just talked bad about Corey Davis. You want me to start Elijah Moore? No, just realize I didn't say start Elijah Moore. I just said I'm telling you, don't drop it. That's the point.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I haven't looked at DraftKings salaries yet, but I'm hoping they give us another week with him at that min 3K, and we will get that bounce back. Everyone's going to go to Corey Davis now. We will zag it back to Elijah Moore and hopefully get some extra dollars in the pockets, people. Moving right along, we got the Bengals at the Bears. Chicago 3-point favorites, 45-point game total. So shout out to our guest that will be on the Thursday edition of this podcast, Hayden Winks, over at Underdog Fantasy for this cool stat. But Hayden basically calculated the neutral pass rate for every team from week 1. The Bengals were dead last at 32%. They are absolutely bringing Joe Burrow along slowly. He still was taking a bunch of sacks when he did go back to pass, unfortunately. But yeah, they are not putting him in the same position as last year when Joe Burrow, before he got hurt, was number one in the entire NFL in dropbacks. I mean, 32% is ridiculously low, people. Only the Lions at 39% were also under 40%. So with that said, great to see Jamar Chase remember how to catch the ball. Him running straight past Bashaud Breeland doesn't necessarily, do it for me in terms of putting him as a top 20 receiver right away. T. Higgins, if you guys caught his interview on the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, 10 touchdowns this year, and he will change his number back to 5. We got 1, so 9 more to go to get T. Higgins back to number 5. Tyler Boyd, unfortunately, dudded on just 4 targets. And I guess that's the problem, Dwayne, because when we were ranking all 3 of these guys, as almost like the AFC Dallas Cowboys, expecting them to have these 3 wide receivers, it was always done under the assumption that this passing game was going to, vie for one of the highest total volume, I guess, just overall target share in the league. So I just think we probably got to bump most of these guys. I think Chase, deserves to be the one, or him and Higgins, but generally, man, I'm going to have them outside the top 24. I believe they're all wide receiver 3s. I think they're upside wide receiver 3s as opposed to the wide receiver 2s that we had them slotted for. Just for now, like the Bengals are clearly not worried about throwing the ball. They want to give Joe Mixon all the freaking touches he can handle. So maybe that was just a facet of them being up against the Vikings. I'm just saying, we're not trading these guys. We're not cutting these guys. Everything could be fine by literally like week 3 or 4 when they're more confident in Burrow. Just for now, calm your expectations a little bit. Boyd's more of a flex. Higgins and Chase, again, I think more upside wide receiver 3s, maybe borderline wide receiver 2s. Like Chase did great, but 7 targets, like that's not going to do it more weeks than not if he's not having the cornerback just refuse to respect the deep balls. So chill out a little bit on these receivers. Great talents. I think their volume will come a little bit later in the season. But Joe Mixon, people, until he gets hurt, hope he doesn't get hurt. I shouldn't have said.
Don't say until. Jesus, Ian. God, do you know how much money I have in Joe Mixon?
Oh, I suck. I'm sorry.
To hang up on you.
Last 7 games, going back to week 1, 2020. Total carries and targets, 21, 20, 20, 31, 22, 21, most recently 33. Looked good doing it last week too. I mean, running through all sorts of tackles, had the week high number of missed forced tackles on rush attempts with 8. Joe Mixon, I haven't done the specific ranks. I think he was my RB6 last week, and he'll probably be there again because it's just so hard to bust with this level of volume. So show out.
He was the still of the second round at running back. Like he opened up so many possibilities. Yes.
You're thrilled about him. Chill out a little bit on the wide receivers. I'm happy we got away with playing Chase and Higgins last week. Just worry about that overall volume moving forward. So, Dwayne, let's talk about why Bears fans should leave the stadium mid-game if Dalton starts bad and they don't make the switch.
Okay, well, I mean, 4.5 ADOT, is that a good reason? 5.4 yards per attempt, is that a good reason?
My eyes, my ears.
6% sack rate, is that a good reason? Andy Dalton is shell-shocked. Like, he looked that way last year in Dallas, and that, to be honest, might be part of why, because he had no offensive line, and he just basically got destroyed all year. He looks, and I hate to say this, like I could be completely wrong, but it just looks like me, like he's, I don't want to say playing scared, Ian, but that's how I feel. It's like, oh my God, just get the ball out. Just get the ball out. Just get the ball out. And, eventually defenses catch on to that stuff, and they're not just going to sit there and let you throw, 3-yard hitches and little crossers the whole game. They can take that crap away. And they will with Andy Dalton. So yeah, he didn't look good, and it causes a downgrade to the whole offense. Really, it just kind of makes you sick. But Mooney, I don't want to be starting Darnell Mooney. He did some nice things: 30% of the air yards, 100% of the end zone targets, targeted on 18% of the routes, was out there 100% of the routes. That's even better than Allen Robinson, who was at 96%. But you just don't really want to be messing around. Cole Kmet, we hoped would get around 80% of the routes. He's at 71%. I mean, he's okay, and he's really just a guy that you want to be stashing for this point. You don't want him out there in your lineups. The guy that really surprised me was David Montgomery. 67% of the rushing attempts, that's way up there, was out there. Now, he did split the short down and distance work with Damian Williams, splitted the long down distance and work with Damian Williams. So like all the kind of situational stuff, they're really splitting. And the 3% targets were the killer. That's where Damian Williams shined. He came in and got 13% of the targets and saw a 25% targets per route run rate. They were doing more design stuff for him. 80% of Damian Williams' targets came as a first read. Obviously, 0 of David Montgomery's came because he only had 1 target. So none of those were on the first read. So that's going to be something to monitor, man, because really we thought David Montgomery, we're like, man, like if he could get 60% of the attempts and still like just get like to around 10 to 12% of the targets, like you could really be in a good spot. And I'm worried that's going to happen. But I will say, man, he looked really good, Ian, like against a good defensive front. He looked the best I've seen him, in his career. Last year, there were some huge holes that he ran through at the end of the season. And again, I'm like you, what are you going to do? You can't take that stuff away from a player. But I thought what he earned on Sunday night, like, he earned a lot of it. Like his offensive line wasn't playing great. A few plays they were, but like he was turning really kind of nothing into 10-yard runs against a pretty good defense. So I was very impressed with the way he played and felt like immediately afterwards, I probably had him underrated. He was RB8 last week. But if you're looking at this matchup, I think I'm fine with playing Montgomery. I'm going to fade every other part of the Bears offense besides Allen Robinson. Those are the 2 that I'm going to use. And everything else, I'm just going to stay away from it until we get a switch at quarterback.
Last 7 games, David Montgomery, PPR finishes RB6, RB1, RB6, RB2, RB8, RB5, most recently RB8. The lack of pass game work was concerning, though, Dwain. Like, Montgomery is not hurting your team. We're still looking at someone that should flirt with 20 combined rushes and targets more weeks than not. I do think we see him kind of settle in as more of an upside RB2 and more weeks than not moving forward. Like last year, he had the 5th most PPR points among any running back from only receiving production. He's just not getting that with Damian Williams instead of Cordero Patterson, unfortunately. So I don't think you can really sell high on Montgomery because people haven't really been treating him as this RB1 he's been anyway. But hey, if someone wants to really drink the Kool-Aid and treat him as the RB1, I wouldn't mind selling him at that point because, again, I don't think this run he's going to have is going to be that sustainable if he's not getting the targets. NFC South matchup, Falcons at the Buccaneers. Tampa Bay opened as 12-point favorites or 13.5-point favorites. Now we are down to 12, 52-point total. And yeah, this is tough for the Falcons, guys. They looked atrocious last week, including the preseason. Falcons quarterbacks have been pressured on 54% of their dropbacks in 2021. I think the Jets are at 43%. Nobody else is over 40. Like, this is miserable. So at this point, man, Ridley and Pitts are staying in lineups no matter what. We're getting the volume, 8 targets for each last week. We talked about Pitts's usage in the waiver wire pod, one of your cool utilization, takeaways. And he got 80% of his routes in the slot or out wide. Like, he is a number 2 pass game option, essentially taking over for Julio, as we hoped he would, like that. When you draft a guy 4th overall, you hope they'd have a plan. They do. So I'm not worried about the lack of efficiency. Keep Pitts in that starting lineup. The question is, should you start Mike Davis? And I would say probably not if you have, a reasonable jump. For matchups, I want to use them as tiebreakers. If it's Mike Davis, as your RB25 versus your RB35, no, start Mike Davis. But RB25 versus RB28, that's when we can consider doing this, because just something about the Buccaneers, man. There's been 12 running backs have double-digit carries against Tampa Bay over the last 2 years. Dalvin Cook managed to get 102 yards. Christian McCaffrey got 59. But Latavius Murray, Wayne Gallman, Alvin Kamara, CEH, Zeke, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, all held under 50 yards. So this Buccaneers front 7, no joke. We all saw it last week with Zeke. We'll talk about the Cowboys here in a minute, but like, Zeke didn't play terribly. He should have scored in that one goal line play where he had the one-on-one. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered if Blake Jarwin touched literally anybody. But again, we'll get to that. With Mike Davis, he has the volume, which is great. But Cordero Patterson is more involved, I think, than a lot of people gave credit for, because he should be. Cordero's fucking awesome. And I'm the proud president of the Cordero Patterson fan club. Leads the league in rushes of 10+ yards. Dwayne, only Lamar Jackson also has 4. But being realistic in this tough matchup, I just think Ridley, Pitts, and that's about all we're doing in Atlanta. I'm feeling good about naming Matt Ryan as my biggest fade of the season. Not to, pat myself too hard in the back after week 1. It just doesn't look pretty. And it's not even as much, I think, Julio leaving the offense as just Arthur Smith and this offensive line not meshing at the moment. So let's talk about a much more positive offense here, Dwayne, because Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we got wide receivers catching balls all over the place. Antonio Brown looking good, but we got Bruce Arians stopping us from feeling too good about the situation. Why don't you tell the people what we're expecting from this backfield after you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry. My dogs have been barking, so I was trying to save the listeners. But yeah, so it's, he's come out and said Ronald Jones starter. What that means, it could be a snap. We don't know. So this is Bruce Arians, and he's in peak form right out of the gate in the season. So it's just, look, I don't want to deal with this backfield, and this is exactly why. And here's the thing, guys. Gio Bernard took 100% of the long down distance snaps, 100% of the 2-minute offense snaps. So he's already basically locked down the passing game. Now you've got what's left in the running game that's really going to be between Fournette and Ronald Jones. And Fournette, yes, was targeted on 24% of his routes last week, which is a really high number. It's not going to continue. It was just kind of a weird freak thing. They weren't doing a lot to design those looks for him. It's where Brady needed to go with the ball. But really, when you look at Brady historically, I know people are like, oh no, it's going to continue because, he throws to his running backs. Well, you got to go back and look when Brady's really had 3 good weapons outside. So back to Moss and Welker. Actually, you can go back to Hernandez and Gronk years and some of those times. And he did not heavily target the running backs 25 and 30% of the time. Heck, last year, in the last 8 games, once you had Antonio Brown, you had Chris Godwin back healthy because he missed 4 of the first 8 games. You had Mike Evans dealing with injuries through, the first 8 weeks of last season too, with a hamstring and then an ankle. Once they were all together and ready to rock, only 15% of the targets from Brady went to the back. So you're just not going to continue to see it. And my guess is Gio's going to get more of the passing down work than anybody else. And so that just leaves Fournette and Jones in an awkward situation where either one could be the hot hand for the week, but you won't know which one it's going to be. It's basically going to be whichever one screws up. Then the other guy's going to get the work. So if you like playing roulette and that's how you like to handle your fantasy teams, I get it. The positive you could say is it's a great offense, right? So there's going to be plenty of chances to score touchdowns, do some good things because you get to play with Tom Brady, you get to play with the Bucs. But outside of that, it's just a situation that I want to avoid. There's really not a lot else to see. People are pretty much up on the Bucs. We talked a little bit about Gronkowski, I think, did we talk about Gronk the other day? I can't remember. Just in case we didn't. He was a surprise. He was not in the rotation, we thought. 74% of the routes to Gronk, 28% to Brait, and 2% to O.J. Howard. Now, could that start to increase as O.J. Howard gets healthier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? We could see that. But Gronk didn't really get over the 70% route mark very often last season. And when he did, he was pretty good. 24% of the times on the routes he ran, he was targeted by Brady in this game. Now, there's a lot of mouths to feed, people. Someone's going to be left out. I think what I learned from this game is maybe the pie is 3 people big, not 2. What we were thinking is, okay, 2 of 3 will get fed. Maybe it can be 3 of 4 get fed.
Is Antonio Brown still number 3 receiver there, or do we just need to rank them like all right next to each other? Because I don't really see the difference at this point because obviously Mike Evans is probably we should just be all in on the Mike Evans bounce back this week. I think Brady's I think he has a little bit like Peyton Manning used to do that. If Marvin Harrison had a huge game, Reggie Wayne would be going off the next week and all that. So I'm not saying Mike Evans is out of the picture, but I definitely, and we all knew that Antonio Brown was a value throughout the offseason. We made that clear. I'm just saying, Dwain, when we make our rankings, I think we're going to need to have all 3 of these guys in the top 24.
Yeah, you got to put them all there. I don't know that I can get them all in the top 24, but
try, damn it.
Yeah, I'll try, Ian. Yes, I'll try. But, it's a really good question. I mean, so here's my thought, and I put it in the utilization article today. I do believe Brown's overperforming based on his targets per route run. We're really not that great. 19%. He got 15% of the targets. He was only out there for 72% of the routes. So as much as I like Antonio Brown, he's a 33-year-old wide receiver that I do believe is 3rd in this pecking order. The guy I'm the most excited about is Chris Godwin. And it's because he gets to work inside. He's the youngest of the bunch. So he's a guy that if I'm probably going to push one in the top 24 every week and just say, look, I got to make sure he's in the top 24, it's Godwin. I still think right now today, Mike Evans is the guy that I would most often, if you said, hey, Dwayne, over the next 12 weeks, who's going to rank inside the top 24 the most out of the Bucs receivers? It's going to be Godwin and Evans. Now, we could continue to get more evidence. I know Tom Brady loves Antonio Brown, but the numbers just they're not quite there. I think you're still going to get these weeks where Brown's going to be outside the top 36. I mean, I just think people are going a little too nuts with the Brown thing. He looked really good the other night, but I saw all these, oh my God, Antonio Brown's the best receiver on the Bucs. Oh my God, Antonio Brown's a wide receiver 1. I don't think that's the case. I think he was a wide receiver 1 in week 1. He caught touchdowns. We know how that goes. When you catch touchdowns, guess what happens to your fantasy points? They go up and you get a spike week and you're a wide receiver 1 that week. So I think it's still going to be distributed. And I'm not saying I don't like Antonio Brown, but if you can find an owner in your league that's super pumped up about him, that maybe loved him back in the day, and now he's like, oh my God, he's back. He's the same player. I don't think it's the same. I would be willing to move Antonio Brown and just live with Godwin or Evans, or just not own a Bucs receiver. Not that I don't want to, because I like them all.
We'll have Godwin at the top, probably expecting Mike Evans and AB to be a little bit more of the boom or bust variety. Booms will be great. Just only one football in this offense. But people, I hope you all realize about all this, that NFL week 1 is in the books, which means PFF has data and grades for every single player who logged a snap last week, as you've heard Dwain and I discussing throughout this pod. What can you get with the PFF subscription? Well, I'm happy you asked. All of PFF's locked article content, PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboards, our grade power projections, cover probabilities and betting values, 0 to 100 grades of every single player, including the top rookies on every team, player prop tool, which shows plus minus values for every NFL prop, and much more. So please, people, check out the highest graded players from week 1 and look to find early value on spread picks and player props for week 2 by getting yourself a PFF subscription. And I also want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. Week 1 may be over, but the season's just getting started at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off week 2, DraftKings is giving new customers $200 in free bets instantly when they bet $1 on any football game. Listen up, because you don't want to miss this. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game. That's promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. And now back to the podcast with a look at the Vikings and Cardinals. We got 5 more matchups to go through, people. Great day to be great. As always, Arizona sitting pretty as a 4.5-point home favorite. Game total sitting at 51. So want to talk a little bit about this Vikings passing game, because Dalvin Cook, as we know, even if Dwain over here wants to downgrade him to RB3, we're still looking at an every week high-end guy that you are, only moving out of the RB1 spot to try to motivate the guy in your fantasy lineup. So with that said, the passing game, Thielen had 10 targets last week. KJ Osborne out of absolutely nowhere had 9. Justin Jefferson had 9. I don't see Osborne, going tit for tat with these 2 receivers for the rest of the year. But I think Thielen's 10 targets could be a sign that myself and others may have written him off a little bit too soon. I mean, we keep yelling regression, but the guy just keeps scoring touchdowns. 16 scores in his last 16 games. To be fair, Justin Jefferson, I have no idea how he did not get a touchdown last week. This dude's ass was in the end zone, and they just somehow found a way not to put him down even at the 1-inch line, but they moved the ball all the way out to the 1. Dalvin Cook ended up, scoring anyway. So when you see that box score, know that Cousins and Jefferson should have had an additional score there if the refs weren't freaking blind in Cincinnati last week. So I would just say, after this week, I'm not going to make too many major adjustments. Jefferson's still at 40% of the offense's air yards. Thielen was at 27%. I don't think Thielen's going to average a touchdown per game for the rest of time, but hey, maybe the guy is awfully good at football. I would just maybe squeeze the disparity a little bit. I probably had Thielen as more of a borderline wide receiver 2. I jumped him up in the good matchup, but more of a borderline wide receiver 2, whereas Jefferson was someone knocking on the door of the top 5. Still treat Jefferson as an every week wide receiver 1. Maybe he's just ranked a little bit closer to 12 than 6 moving forward. And for Thielen, man, hey, if we're getting the closer target disparity between the guys, he could end up surprising us. Like, that's the potential problem here. Like last year, off the top of my head, I think the final target totals was like Justin Jefferson 125 or 130, and Thielen finished closer to 100. And that was despite Jefferson not getting a full-time role until week 3. So the thought was that, that would grow a little bit more, but at least through 1 week, Adam Thielen looking awfully involved. So I think, you all out there are probably starting these guys regardless, in typical redraft formats. Just realize, maybe we wrote off Adam Thielen a little bit too soon. This guy continues to be pretty damn good at the game. Hopefully the Vikings can keep Kirk Cousins upright. We saw what the Cardinals did against the Tennessee Titans last week. I'm not quite buying it. Chandler Jones is fantastic. We all know that. JJ Watt's, out there doing his thing, Buda Baker. They got some good players, but I just think if the Vikings can protect Kirk just a little bit, these Cardinals cornerbacks could get exposed on their respective islands. Now, Dwain, I think Kyler Murray was the single most impressive player of week one when you just look at his plays and some of the crazy shit he was pulling out of his hat out there. But we also have plenty of good takeaways from this wide receiver room that I know you want to get off your chest.
Yeah, no, man, he's amazing. Like when you watch him, very rarely in the NFL do you just look at something and you're like, wow, that player's speed and elusiveness is on another level. Like he's like Houdini. He's like, I'm just going to go do this and there's nothing you guys can do. And I'm just going to pop out of bounds. You're not going to get to hit me. It's going to be frustrating as shit. Like if you're a defender, because he does that crap over and over and over. Honestly, I don't think he's at much risk of getting hurt when he's running. I think he's at bigger risk when he's in the pocket, to be honest. I think when he's running, like he just knows how to take care of himself and he knows angles really well and he knows his abilities. So he doesn't take big hits when he's out there, because I'm watching it. I'm like, oh man. And like he slips it and you're just like, oh, there he goes.
That's always been my issue with this, stereotype that rushing quarterbacks are more likely to get hurt. Like what? Some guy that can't move, that's just gonna be a statue in the pocket. So DNs can just tee off on him. That's what you want.
I agree. Especially a player like when you think back to like Robert Griffin, like he always struggled with it because he didn't have a good slide move, but Kyler Murray, I mean, this is a baseball guy. He knows the slide move. He knows when to get out of bounds. Like, you see him all the time, just like real quickly get out of bounds and just kind of reach the arm out and get like that extra yard. Like he is one of my favorite players to watch right now. And he was the guy in that second tier that I really loved the most and wish that I was able to get more ownership, because he's the one that I'm like, man, if one player in the league could throw for like 4,500 yards and rush for 1,000. Like it's Kyler Murray. As much as I like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray is the guy in his current iteration of his offense versus what, you're dealing with in Baltimore. Like I like what you get. So yeah, I'll go real quick here. If you want to hear about the receivers, honestly, we already talked about them in the episode before. The basic thing is Christian Kirk getting to work out of the slot 96% of the time. I do expect in a more competitive game, he should get his routes up to around 75%. Targets per route run, 22%. See, my dogs are trying to talk to everybody again. And so he won that inside role. He had shared it with Rondell Moore earlier in the offseason. So it's really his. And so I think the pecking order here, despite the routes and the targets, not the targets, but the routes going really to, AJ Green, I think Christian Kirk is the guy you want to own. And so the backs were what I was going to touch on this time, since we talked about the receivers yesterday. So Chase Edmonds, 58% of the snaps, 49% to James Conner, 34% of the rushing attempts to Chase Edmonds, 50% to James Conner. Routes, though, 78%, man, to Chase Edmonds. So last year, if you looked at it, really it was more Kenyon Drake being out there on early downs, and Chase Edmonds would come in and get the long down and distance in 2 minutes. So now what this offense has done is they essentially said, Edmonds is the lead back, and we're just not going to run the ball as much, at least in this first game. Almost 60% of the snaps, like I said, but still got 100% of the long down distance, 100 of the 2 minute offense. So Chase kind of has a unique role. He's an early down back that they use more in passing situations versus rushing, and he gets all of the normal receiving work. So I really like him. I think that in this offense, that makes him a low end RB2. Yes, Kyler Murray's willing to run. So yes, that impacts your targets to a running back. And you've obviously got to worry about that. James Conner's going to carry everything inside the 5. Short down and distance, he carried 100% of it. And whatever he doesn't do, Kyler Murray's going to do, because the only inside the 5 attempt they had last week, Kyler Murray took that as well. So Evans is not going to score you a lot of touchdowns from in close. He's going to need to score those from, further out, and he's going to need for receptions to really be part of his game. But a target rate of 16%, targets per route run, target percent total was 13%. So not like fabulous, Ian, but I still think it puts him in the low end RB2 range. And part of it is, I just think it's a really good offense. So there's just going to be enough to keep Chase Edmonds right there. And if not, like he's a high end RB3, right? Or a flex play. But I think he's right there on that verge, RB2, RB3.
And I think in a more like close game, I mean, this was 38-13 by the end of the third quarter last week against the Titans. I mean, Edmonds had the 9-8 lead in carries after 3 quarters. It was only in the 4th quarter that they really started just pounding James Conner into the defense, trying to grind some clock. So yeah, Chase Edmonds, absolutely low end RB2. James Conner, if you're really in a pinch, I guess you can throw him in a flex. He will score some touchdowns sooner rather than later. Just not someone, we're going to be thrilled about doing so. If we're not getting any targets, people, that's just tough to do in a game like fantasy football that rewards receiving backs so heavily. Next up, we got the Titans at Seahawks. I swear, if the Titans don't give us a freaking shootout here, I'm going to start getting pissed. I'm willing to write off last week, but not this one. So Seattle sitting as 5-point favorites, opened at 6, 53.5 game total. Vegas confident that we will see some points up there. But yeah, people, I'm not putting a ton of stock into what happened last week. The big concerning factor, though, was the Titans play action rate. And I've seen, several analysts already throw this out. So credit to everyone and myself, just for pointing at the obvious thing. But 11.4% play action rate. That was the second lowest mark in week 1. In 2020, they ranked first at 36.2%. So basically inverse Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of the play action rate, not being there in all 2020, now no longer being there in 2021. And since Tannehill joined the Titans in 2019, he is 3rd in PFF passing grade and play action, tied for 2nd in yards per attempt on non-play action plays, still tied for 5th in PFF passing grade, tied for 14th though in yards per attempt. And that's why I'm not super concerned. They're not going to be that bad every single week moving forward. AJ Brown, Julio Jones, you're going to get theirs, just like Derrick Henry is going to start ripping off some big runs. The last time Derrick Henry went back-to-back games under 100 rushing yards was halfway through the 2019 season. This guy is a freak of nature in an offense that is going to continue to feed him the ball. And maybe, just maybe, Dwayne, a little bit more often through the air. Low key, 4 targets. And hey, Derrick Henry has never had more than 5 targets in a game. I get it. He's not Eckler. He's not McCaffrey, but I don't know. Getting that freaking dude in space, not the worst idea I've ever heard of. So Henry, AJ Brown, Julio, we're firing them all up again. And Ryan Tannehill, I will still continue to treat as a borderline QB1 in hopes that week 1 was more of a fluke than anything. Now, Dwayne, the Seahawks did not look bad in week 1. In fact, they looked pretty damn good. Russ was cooking in Shane Waldron's system, even though they weren't throwing the ball all that much.
Yeah, man. It was, he and Stafford were 2 of the more efficient quarterbacks on the week. 11 yards per attempt, 10.9 ADOT. He was out there in a design rushing attempt, 12%, 7% scramble. So you're getting a quarterback that can throw for 300 yards and also tack on 20% of a team's attempts on the ground. I mean, there's nothing you can't like, about Russ. The only thing that I was a little surprised with, in last week's game, Ian, was just the fact that, we heard all this news about the tempo, right? How much faster things were going to run. We look back at McVay, his teams are always on the top, and you get Waldron coming over and it's all Russ is talking about in camp. It's all Lockett's talking about. It's all, Shane Waldron himself is talking about, and who knows what happened here, but only 2.2 plays per minute. That's around average. Only 54 plays in the game, 54% pass, 46% run. I will say they trailed 0%. They never trailed in the game. They were only in a close game, and they were only in a close score, meaning within 3 points, 17%. 83% of the plays they had a lead of 4 points or more. So that's gonna be a factor whenever you're looking at what's going on with these plays. But I will say the antenna is up, because you always worry with a coach like Carroll, is he going to be in there to be holding it down? Be we can't be running this fast offense. This means we're going to make mistakes and turn the ball, whatever. Pete Carroll, love you. Just keep chewing your gum. Let the offensive coordinator handle offense. As far as the running backs go, man, Chris Carson, love to get your thoughts on it, Ian, but RB15, I mean, he's a low end RB1 right now. He's honestly, he's kind of similar to Jonathan Taylor. I'm not saying he's Jonathan Taylor as a player, but you got, Rashad Penny with a calf injury. So Alex Collins is probably going to get a little bit more work. But the thing that really was intriguing to me is 100% of the long down and distance snaps. They didn't run the 2-minute offense. Obviously, we just talked about how slow they were. So we don't know what's going to happen in that situation. But 100% of the long down and distance work went to Chris Carson, and he was getting those snaps already before Rashad Penny left the game. So if you're telling me that we're going to get a back that's going to get 65% of the carries in a really good offense, it's going to be out. He was in a route in 66% of the plays. That's a huge number. 14% of the targets, right? 100%, like I said, in what we would absolutely say, look, this has to be a pass. That's long down and distance. That means 3rd or 4th down and 7 yards or more to go. You're running every time. That's why I choose those certain cuts as I go back and look. Okay, how often did the league run as a league over the last 3 years in this situation? And so it's not just arbitrary. I'm like, 3rd and 7. That's like the breaking point where pretty much it's undisputed. You're throwing. You could even make the argument once you get to 3rd and 4th, 3rd and 4 to 6 yards, that the league is much more tilted towards, passing as well. But I just try to be super clear about it and be like, look, there's no way a team should be running the ball in this situation. And Carson's out there in all of those. So Carson's a guy that, even though he's finished at RB15, I think he's going to have plenty, Ian, of top 8 weeks inbound, when he punches some touchdowns in. I'm excited about what I saw with Carson. Obviously, you're always going to have to think, he runs so hard. Is he going to get dinged up here or there? But I think you talked about it in a pod earlier. He hasn't missed near as many games as what people think, and they get in their head about Chris Carson. So if you drafted Chris Carson in the 3rd or the 4th round, especially after you picked up an elite receiver and a tight end, I think you're feeling pretty good right now at this moment. On the receivers, not going to say much. It was mostly the issue was the volume. It really looked like the old stat lines we used to see where it's like, 5 targets to DK, 5 targets to Tyler. Thank God they were freaking awesome on those 5 targets. What I want to see this next week is I want to see that bumped up to 8 targets each, right? 7 targets each, and that same kind of efficiency. And then we get that potential rocket ship to the moon potential with a guy like DK or with Tyler Lockett.
100% all the way around. For those that didn't see, Rashad Penny is out at least for week 2 with a re-aggravated calf injury. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reported that he is expected to be shut down for a few weeks. So, that was the only mild concern with Carson going this year. And, unfortunately, predictably, Penny has landed, back on not the injured list, but he is banged up and will not be active in week 2 confirmed. Did you watch the Peyton Eli stream from Monday Night Football?
No, I didn't. Was it awesome? I need to go back and watch it.
They had Russell Wilson on for the entire 4th quarter and overtime. I never thought I would really enjoy Russ. I don't know, man. I just always kind of thought he was lame. I don't know. He's a great quarterback, obviously, but he was shooting the shit with Peyton and Eli, and I actually really enjoyed him out there. He was trying to give this spiel on what he thinks overtime should be, and they had to cut him off before the commercial, but it was electric television, man. I was so much more tuned in.
I'm going to have to go back and check it out. I heard about it. Man, anytime I can hear Peyton Manning talk, I love it. It's like once Brady is done, and I don't want to wish that on any, I'm fine with Brady as long as he wants to play. That's a player I want to hear more from too.
The first play of the game, Peyton's the first play of the season is going to tell us all we need to know. And Carr zips it over Waller's head, and Peyton just goes 6-11. All right, people. Cowboys at the Chargers. LAC 3-point favorites. Game total was at 55.5, the highest in the week. Opened at 52. Actually, it's tied for the highest with Chiefs Ravens, who we'll get to next. But yeah, so we didn't really break down the Cowboys game much. On Thursday recording, we're doing a DFS show to be published on Friday this year. But just to kind of go back on the storyline, I don't know what game people were watching to think that Ezekiel Elliott is washed or bad or whatever, mean adjective you want to, or verb, whatever the hell part of language we're talking about.
It's just a pile on. It's all a pile on.
Quit piling on Zeke, people. Again, I've said this previously in this podcast. He should have scored on the option pitch where he was one-on-one with a safety. You're paid $90 million. You got to win that. You got to get in the end zone. I will give him that. The play before, Dak, if he puts it on his chest, it should have been a walk-in receiving touchdown. And this was against the Tampa Bay defense. I read you guys the list of other running backs that haven't done a single thing against them. So we knew this was going to be tough. If he could have found a way to score a touchdown on an offense that looks like they can score 30, just rolling out of bed, then it would have been just fine. The big play for me, man. Okay, Zeke didn't look like the same guy we saw as a rookie, just ripping off, 60, 70-yard monster runs, it seemed like every week. But he beat Devin White to the freaking edge, man. Even if, PFF maybe isn't as high on Devin White as some other, evaluators, he is, undoubtedly one of, if not the single fastest linebacker in the league. So that was great to see from Zeke. The pass protection was obviously great. Just realize Dak Prescott kept checking out of runs, as we found out, in the report this week, because the situation called for it. And the Cowboys put up a lot of points. 82% snaps for Zeke. Tony Pollard is not making this a 60-40 split. That was the concern. It's not the case. Continue to fire up Zeke as a weekly top 5 running back. And Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, man, I know everyone already had CeeDee in your wide receiver 1 range. Now you got to get on the same boat that I've been on since April. Both of these guys are wide receiver 1s, tied for first with the most first read targets in the league with 14. Absolute madness. Number 4 and number 5 in air yards, respectfully. We'll see where they fall in the rankings. I don't know that we can necessarily fire them up in the top 5, but man, Dwain, they're definitely going to be top 10 moving forward. Again, this offense can put up 30 in their sleep. And now without Michael Gallup in the fold, I just think things are going to be even more condensed around them. So Cedric Wilson, someone that I think is fine if you want to try to pick him up and you're really desperate in a deeper league and put him in the flex. But Noah Brown was inactive for that game. I do think we're going to see more of a rotation at that wide receiver 3 spot, maybe even more 2 tight end stuff with Jarwin and Dalton Schultz. So for now, Zeke, Cooper, CeeDee, all RB1s and wide receiver 1s. Obviously, Dak's a top 5 talent. And yeah, that's it. It's great. We have the fantasy-friendly offense we thought was there. It's unfortunate that Dak's arm maybe looks 85% of what it should be. I would also just say, Dak, he has a good arm, but it's not like he's always just been known for this guy with a rocket launcher anyway. It's strong enough for him to put up freaking 400 plus yards against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The last time we saw them made Patrick freaking Mahomes look more mortal than he ever has been. So to me, week 1 didn't paint any bad news for this Cowboys offense as much as people wanted to try to overreact to the first game of the year. Continue to feel great about Zeke. I think everyone does feel great about Zeke, Dwain. I think it's just fantasy analysts yelling in their own mirror about, buy high on Ezekiel Elliott. Who the hell is selling Ezekiel Elliott for, pennies at this point? I don't think anyone, and I'm tired of that storyline. So now that I got that off my chest, tell me, Dwain, about a Los Angeles Chargers offense that, holy shit, they might actually have a great offensive line now.
Yeah, they're looking really good. The thing that was the most encouraging to me about week 1 is I was just concerned, how often are they going to throw the ball? You're installing more of that wide zone scheme. You're going to install the passing concepts from the Saints offense. 2 offenses that we've seen really be more of a what I would call, if you're playing Madden, it'd be the pass balance playbook, Ian. You'd be like 55-45 type of thing.
Nice.
And, they threw the ball 62% of the time with a lead, and they led on 52% of the plays in the game. The other 48% of the plays were close, so within 3 points, and they passed on 67% of those. So those are 2 really good marks. So it does look like Herbert's going to continue to drop back and sling it. Austin Eckler wasn't targeted in this game. I do think he's obviously limited due to the hamstring, so I really wouldn't read too much into that, folks. He was out there on 50% of the routes, handled 50% of the rushing attempts, 100% of the attempts inside the 5, which was a nice little positive. So if all of a sudden Eckler gets back and he's healthy and he's also getting the work inside the 5, that was the one big question people had. Was he going to get that work inside the 5? And if he does, and he's healthy in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and the way this offense looks like it could really get going, man, you could be talking about a top 5 running back, which is what you were hoping for if you were taking him at the end of the first round, early second round, back in August and in early September. As far as the receivers go, I already issued one apology to Mike Williams, but I'll issue one more because now I have more data to back it up. And for those of you who don't know, and you're not going to go back and listen, but I don't really care. I just have to own this. I said Mike Williams sucks on the pregame show on Sunday. And so Mike Williams did a great job, 85% of the routes, 27% of the targets, tied for the team lead with Keenan Allen, 8 out of 10 instead of 25. So he's working more intermediate, not just being the guy to run off coverage and catch balls down the field. Led the team in air yards with 31% and led the team in end zone targets with 40%, something that we know he can do. I remember the year 3 years ago where he went nuts and caught 11 touchdowns, even though he wasn't being targeted that much. And then the next year, his ADP shot way up and he kind of let everybody down with an injury. But this could be a good year, for Mike Williams. When I was on the pod with Bloom, he brought up how much money they paid him just to have him back for a year. And even though it's a 1-year contract, Sig's right. I mean, there is something to that. So maybe this is the year for Mike Williams. It's really hard for players to have the yards per route run that he's had and not be able to break out, especially for top 40 picks. But maybe this is the year. And there's always years that's the beauty of this game, right? Just when you think you know it, these things we use, they're guidelines, they're not hard and fast predictors of what's going to happen. We're just trying to play the odds on this stuff for you guys and give you the best insight that we can. But really, the stuff we're using is not predictive in the end, right? It's not like we've built out some algorithm that knows Mike Williams is going to do X, Y, Z. We don't know, but really does no one else. So, but we do have the best data. So we really try to bring that through in the analysis. So for Williams, it was a nice game for him. Liked what he did did. You know, he finished as wide receiver 14. I didn't upgrade for last night's games, but through Monday night, he was sitting at wide receiver 14 for the week, and you were getting him in the 9th to 11th round in your draft. So you can feel pretty good about him. I think he is a wide receiver 3 with a little bit of upside on top of that moving forward. Now, he will immediately disappoint us next week, and then we'll come back on and I'll revert to my old take, and I'll say that I never said any of these things.
Also want to give a thank you to Keenan Allen, who was my first helicopter DFS long shot of the season. Didn't find the end zone. I'm not counting it as a win, but he did get 100 yards, 9 catches. Certainly didn't blow up your lineup.
Helicopter didn't crash, though.
Didn't crash. It didn't quite make it to the destination. You know, we had to pull off halfway there, but didn't crash at least. So 13 targets on the game. We will keep reading this long list of his targets with Justin Herbert until it goes south. Targets in 12 non-injury shortened games with Justin Herbert: 19, 19, 13, 13, 12, 11, 11, 11, 11, 10, 10, and 7. Keep firing Keenan Allen up as a top 10 fantasy receiver. He was born to be. Sunday Night Football, we got the Kansas City Chiefs at the Baltimore Ravens. KC opened at 2.5. Now they're up to 4 points. Game total sitting at tied for the lead with the Cowboys at 55.5. So Tyreek Hill has 74% of the offense's air yards, which is absolutely bonkers. The wide receiver 1 at this point. You know, maybe Devontae gets a nice bounce back, but as long as Mahomes is just going to feed Tyreek Hill to his heart's desire, we need Hill to be the undisputed wide receiver 1 that, hey, maybe he should have been the entire offseason. You know, I was still giving Devontae the benefit of the doubt, you know, thinking Rodgers was always going to be back. I bumped him off, you know, during the kind of thick of the hoopla when it seemed like Jeopardy was a realistic case, but alas, you know, that turned out to not be the case. And yeah, also a fun tidbit. They had Travis Kelce on the second quarter, maybe second or third quarter of the Manning stream. And they were talking to Kelce, and Peyton asked Kelce, he's like, hey, so when you're watching these games, are you like actually trying to, you know, steal signals? You just kind of looking at it as a fan. And Kelce goes like, oh, it just kind of depends on the opponent. And he's like, if it's an AFC West team, maybe I'm a little more tuned in. And he's like, for this one, you know, with us having the Chargers next week, I'm not too worried about it. And then he like caught himself and he goes, oh, wait a second. We actually do play the Ravens next week, so I probably should be looking at this more. The Chiefs don't even care who they're playing because they put up points against freaking everyone. And if you thought Baltimore had a hard time guarding Darren Waller, I don't know what is going to happen when they go up against Travis Kelce. And they're just down guys at this point. Marcus Peters. I think Humphrey got hurt during that game last night, which isn't good. I mean, Jimmy Smith is banged up, or he's on another team at this point. Like all those great cornerbacks that we knew made up the Ravens for the better part of the last 2 or 3 years. It's just problematic because they're not healthy enough to get out there at the moment. So I'm sure, you know, they'll perform fine enough compared to, you know, most defenses against the Chiefs. But as we see, they put up freaking 30 plus in their sleep. I don't expect that to change. Final point, I would just talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 74% snap rate, 14 of the 15 rushes and 3 targets. We're just seeing like some of the same problems the Bills running backs have, man. Like since week 1 of last season, the Chiefs running backs are 26th in carries inside the 5-yard line, and they're only 17th in targets. So like we're not getting the same sort of offense that enabled Jamal Charles and Kareem Hunt to, you know, these exceptional highs over the years. I'm not saying Clyde couldn't get a little more involved in the passing game moving forward, but for right now, I do think we need to keep him kind of as that upside RB2 as opposed to throwing him in the top 5, top 6, we're used to seeing Andy Reid's overall RB1. So I know he didn't find the end zone. I thought he did look good though, and from a tackle breaking perspective, and I think better days will be ahead once we finally get a few of those touchdowns for the RB1 and probably the single best offense in the league. So Dwain, the Ravens, his backfield's messy, man. We know Lamar is going to be giving us his, you know, even in that game last night with 2 fumbles, we had the 86 rushing yards or whatever, and he was just fine. But man, oh man, what is going on? Why did Tyson Williams give away so much usage to Latavius Murray in the second half?
Yeah, man, I think it's a great question. You know, he started off the game hot. You know, if you look at the PFF rushing grade, he clearly graded, you know, better than Latavius Murray for the game with a 70.7 versus a 59.8. But it's like you said, it was almost like they thought Murray was their hammer for the second half. And I was kind of like, well, like it's not like you're just icing a game here. Like you're still in a competitive game that you're trying to win. Oh, by the way, which you lost. So yeah, Lamar Jackson did lead the team in the attempts, but it's concerning because Tyson had the chance to really kind of like assert himself and take the backfield. And it's one of those things, Ian, where it's like, we don't ever know like everything that's going on behind the scenes and what the coaches have seen in practice and what are the conversations going on the sideline, all this stuff that bakes into it. But for whatever reason, they felt Murray was the guy that they needed to use down the stretch at the end of the game when it was at the most important time. And that's concerning. So what I think we're probably going to see, and last week, my thought was, look, it's the one chance to have a Ravens back actually see 50 to 60% of the attempts. And he was on his way to it. But then it didn't happen. So it's either one of two things. He did something in the game they didn't like, or number two, they just really are that committed to like, we don't pound anyone back. We're going to rotate no matter who they are. And either one of those things, I feel like that's not good for Tyson Williams. So, if you went and you spent a lot of free agent, of your fab money last week on Williams, obviously it's not like you're going to turn around and release the guy. He's still in a good offense, folks. Even if he's just really more in a role like what we thought Gus Edwards was about to be in and still sharing some time with Latavius Murray, that can still be fruitful for you in fantasy. It just doesn't have the potential shine that we thought it may have had, 24 hours ago before we saw the game last night. Heck, you could go back, to the end of the first half and we felt like things were looking, really good. As far as the rest of the Ravens go, Mark Andrews signed the big contract, and then it's like immediately, right out of the gate, doesn't get to do a lot, only targeted 4 times, Ian, 3 receptions. But we've seen this with Andrews before. Here's the thing though. I'm mostly excited about Andrews because 34 receiving snaps. So that's pretty good when you look at what it was from a Ravens perspective. He was out there most of the time during the passing plays, which is something that we always want to be looking at. So I think, with Andrews, look, you're going to have to kind of live with that a little bit. But actually, yeah, what is it? 36 passing plays for the team, and Andrews was out there for 34% of the routes. Andrews has never had that, Ian. He's always been more of like in that 70% range. I mean, he's up in the 90% range. We've talked about the formula for tight ends. He has half of it right now. Now he just needs to get the targets, which we know he can do. He's done it his whole career. It's not like Mark Andrews is not going to be good. So while he may have had kind of a little bit of a dud, not a little bit, he had a dud first game. He's a guy you got to continue to start. 2 other players I'll call out really quickly in the passing game. You got Sammy Watkins, who is out there the same amount, 34 of the 36 passing plays by the Ravens. And then you had Marquise Brown, who managed to also get into the end zone. Marquise Brown, his streak of looking really good on week 1 continues, despite the fact that he was limited late into camp. So for me, I still think this offense is about Andrews and Marquise Brown. Those are the 2 players on the Ravens from a passing perspective that I would really, be the most willing to own. And I guess the last thing just to say here, it's 36 passing plays out of 63 plays total. That's high for the Ravens. For most offenses, you would look at that and go like, oh my gosh, like they run the ball all the time. Actually, for the Ravens, they actually threw the ball on more than half of their plays. And there's weeks where they throw the ball on 40% of their plays. So it's just something I've kind of been looking at, Ian, like, you've gotten rid of Hayden Hurst. You didn't really sign another tight end to come in. Now Mark Andrews all of a sudden is running routes all the time. You're not rotating him. You draft a first-round receiver this year. You go grab Sammy Watkins. You get a first-round receiver 2 years ago in Marquise Brown. You draft Devin Duvernay in the 2nd or 3rd round last year. Miles Boykin the year before that in the 2nd round. Like, I wonder, do they really want to be, they want to be this exotic team that can run and do all these things, but it's almost like, are they trying to build their team to like evolve into this other thing where they could actually let Lamar throw more? And so just something to kind of keep an eye on. I know 36 out of 63 doesn't seem like a lot to most of you, but for the Ravens, that's a pretty decent number.
Shout out Hollywood Brown has caught a touchdown and or surpassed 80 receiving yards in 9 consecutive games going back to last year. Only thing I would say with Tyson Williams, the blocking could have had something to do with it, man.
Yeah.
Late in the 3rd quarter, he missed one pretty bad that led to a Lamar sack. And then in overtime, it looks like he kind of missed up his chip that led to the Lamar Jackson fumble. So I am not the, aficionado on running back pass protection, assignments and all that. I could be off on a little bit. That would make sense if that was part of the issue. And also shout out Sammy Watkins, your week 1 god. Scott Barrett had a cool stat over fantasy points over the past 3 seasons, regular seasons. Sammy Watkins has just 3 games with at least 65 receiving yards. They came in week 1, 2019, week 1, 2020, and week 1, 2021. Keep being you, Sammy. Final game, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us this whole way. I think I said in the beginning of the pod, Dwayne, like if we went through everything, we'd go over 2 hours. And hey, fuck it, we went over 2 hours anyway. So Lions at Packers, Monday Night Football, Green Bay, 11-point favorites, game total at 48.5. Let's go, Jared Goff. Screw those wide receivers. Screw your vacated targets. We're condensing this around the good players in the offense. The most targets among running backs right now on this day, September 14th. DeAndre Swift with 11, Jamal Williams with 9, and Christian McCaffrey with 9. Jared Goff, 6.3 yard average target depth. He's throwing the ball to his running backs and TJ Hawkinson, and we should love it. So DeAndre Swift, one of Dwayne's big takeaways from the utilization report was in full PPR settings, we're looking at legit RB1 people. Again, targets historically are worth 2.7 times the amount that one carry is. Just, again, it's a weird game. Why are targets worth that much more? I don't know, but it's the game we play. And Jamal Williams getting 9, even if that number is like cut in half, man, if we're looking at 15 to 20 potential carries and targets per week, I don't care if the Lions offense isn't going to score 30 plus every single game. He is going to be maybe the single best flex with benefits guy in that kind of tier 3, or I should say the RB3 range. So honestly, Swift needs to be in every starting lineup. I think Williams is probably going to give you more of a floor than a lot of these other flexes. TJ Hawkinson, top 5, if not top. Didn't you say you put him at tight end 4 now? Like if you could do it over again? Oh, no. You said you put Kyle Pitts at 4.
Yeah, but man, they're interchangeable to me at this point. It's tomato, like both guys. And then I think the other guy jumping up right behind them now is Higbee.
Yeah. So mad game. If you guys didn't see it, it was 41-17 with like 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. And somehow the Lions had the ball down 8 with a chance to go ahead and tie it. So absolutely ridiculous.
Everybody just wanted the Lions to dust Shanahan after what he did to everybody in fantasy for the day.
That would have been so fantastic. But yeah, George Kittle let an onside kick go off his helmet. Deebo Samuel
took a bad hop on him, Ian. Bad hop.
Deebo Samuel fumbled after picking up the first down. Just wild. So I think some of these target totals are a little bit inflated. But with that said, that's where the offense wants to go with the ball. Like all the screens they had going, like a lot of these were designed looks as well. So Swift, Williams, Hawkinson. Thank you, Detroit. I think we might just have 3 viable fantasy guys when, a week ago, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was only 1. So good news in Detroit in terms of fantasy land, and, good luck getting that number 1 overall pick that you guys are fighting with the Jaguars and Texans for ahead of 2022. Now, Dwayne, let's talk about maybe the single most disappointing team from last week, depending on what you're judging it. But my goodness, the Packers got railroaded by the Saints. I am kind of approaching this like the Titans, where I'm kind of inclined to throw it out and call it a fluke. How do you feel?
Yeah, look, you have to watch out for these teams that rely so heavily on their run game when all of a sudden it isn't working. And they believe, these teams do, that if my run game is not working, my play action game won't work, which is wrong. Someone in their analytics department needs to tell them, still keep showing play action, because linebackers, they have to fill, right? They have to take a step based on what happens and the way they read the offensive line and their keys to make sure they seal a lane. And so as soon as they see that, they have to, unless their coaches have done like what Bill Belichick did in the Super Bowl against the Rams. And he adjusted for that and said, look, we're not going to overreact to that because we just want to basically dare Todd Gurley to beat us because they thought he was iced. And they just didn't want to give up the plays, in the passing game. And so when you look at this offense, they played from behind on 72 or 88% of the plays. So when you're on an offense that just has Devontae Adams, and I'm sorry, I like you, Alan Lazard. I like you, MVS. I like you, Robert Tonyan. But look, without Aaron Rodgers, those guys really aren't very good. And so all of a sudden you're a one-dimensional offense. All you have to do is worry about Devontae Adams, as good as he is, And Aaron Jones, as good as he is, he's only a running back. So he can't do everything else. And then the script took part of what he is good at away from him. So that same thing happened to the Titans. It's the same kind of thing that can happen to a lot of these offenses that are really based around the run. You can see it with the Browns, all this kind of stuff. So I think that's what happened, and it was exposed. So the Packers used less play action, still 21%, but Aaron Rodgers, 4.8 yards per attempt, like that, man, you don't see that, from Aaron Rodgers. The thing I'll say here, I know a lot of folks, because I had Aaron Jones number 4 in the rankings, so I'm getting a lot of DMs about, oh my God, like I took Aaron Jones, he sucks, Dwain. What do I do? And so I'm going to say a word. Relax.
Got him.
So here's the deal with Aaron Jones that you guys need to know. I'm gonna hook you up right here. So he did not play in the fourth quarter. Why? Because I just told you the Packers were getting destroyed, and they're like, screw it. This game's over. We're losing. We don't want Jones hurt. We don't want Aaron Rodgers hurt. We don't want Devontae Adams hurt. Okay. So they were all out of the game. Before that, if you look at that, he played 74% of the snaps through the first 3 quarters. He handled 63% of the rushing attempts. He's been stuck down, around that 50 to 55, 57% of the routes where he had been stuck around a 40%. He had 12% of the targets in that stretch and 18% targets per route run rate, which is really good for a back. If you get up between 18 and 22, you're rocking. And 50% of the long down and distance work. So I think he's going to be the 2-minute back, just like I thought before. I know people see when you just look at it, you're like, well, Kylan Hill got in there. Most of Kylan Hill's work came in the fourth quarter, folks.
All of it except one snap came.
All but one snap. Yeah. So, we can basically say all of it happened except, the one snap. So it's a situation where you still should feel bullish on Aaron Jones. And if you've got an owner in your league, because some people do, you guys know who these people are. Just like with the Zeke thing, Ian and I think nobody's going to sell Zeke low, but your league. Some people don't have the stomach for, oh my God, I've had one bad week. So who those owners are, and they're nervous Nellies, and they're in your league. So you go kick the tires on it for sure. But Aaron Jones, I think you have a story you can potentially tell. You're like, because people don't dig into this stuff. All they see is, well, number one, they probably don't know the snaps, but if they did, they're like, oh my God, 3-way backfield. This Kylan Hill guy is a problem now, man. Aaron Jones is screwed. You took him in the first round. So that's the way I would treat the Aaron Jones situation.
The Lions have allowed in their last 7 games 41 points, 37, 47, 46, 31, 30, most recently 41 points. We're going to see a hell of a bounce back next Monday night. Again, yes. Like Dwain said, relax. And you can now relax listening to someone else. I'm going to let Dwain get back to his wife and kids, who I'm sure by the day are becoming more and more frustrated with me, always stealing dad and hubby for hours at a time to talk fantasy. But you know what, Dwain? It's PFF for you, and we got to.
Here's my job.
Here's the job. Sorry, honey. Got to do the job. I'm going to get back to PFF Lily, make sure she has all the treats and hopefully hasn't peed everywhere like she does. That's going to wrap up this edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. For Dwain McFarland, I'm Ian Hartitz, and until next time, take care, everybody.